In the depths of the abyss, where there is neither time nor space, eternal chaos reigns. In the midst of the darkness, vast voids are filled with monsters and stars, like shards of a torn world being carried through eternity. On the horizon rise impregnable piles of rocks and stones, sharp as the guardians of a forgotten era. Bright constellations twinkle above them, their light cutting through the purple haze as if piercing through dense layers of cosmic dust. Above it all rises the fierce seven-headed dragon Org, his massive figure floating in the light of distant stars, as if dissolving into the infinity of space. The gaze of each of his 7 heads encompasses a different aspect of the universe. He is the embodiment of the ancient forces that control the abyss. At the same time, the planet eater, Vulcan, reappears before us. His massive body does not hover, but instead seems to be pressed into space by his unbridled rage and power. His glowing eyes, full of frenzied anger, pierce everything around him, expressing pure aggression. A simultaneous encounter with 2 such supermonsters in the abyss is so rare that it can be considered unique. Their combined presence poses an unprecedented threat that is unlikely to escape alive. But now they are joined by a humanoid creature hidden in thick shadows. Its appearance remains unclear, which only adds to the atmosphere of mystery and intrigue surrounding this creature. At the center of this battle stands Yongseong, his eyes burning with a cold light, reflecting a calm but formidable determination. He stares forward, aware of the gravity of the situation but not showing fear of his enemies. Indeed, the time of the battle had stretched out much longer than he had realized. Janssen was sure that more than 300 years had passed, and now all his strength and endurance had been tested to the limit. Gaze, Janssen stopped on a shimmering space pulsing with pink-purple light. Of course, dealing with the enemies would be easier if they came one by one, rather than united into such a powerful force. After achieving the title of unbeatable training master, the world begins to resonate with Yonsong. His power is growing rapidly, and it is difficult to convey in words. Like a constellation that flashes brighter and more powerful in the vast depths of space. When Earth was first connected to the abyss, humanity learned that mythology is not just a figment of the imagination. The beings, dubbed constellations, were the closest thing to what people thought of as deities. They blessed us and enlarged the ranks of their followers. As the number of followers grew, so did the authority of the constellations. Earth, with nearly 10 billion souls, was like a gold mine for them. A battleground for the constellations who fought to take away each other's followers. Among them were more evil constellations that sought to take over the Earth at any cost. And then this man appeared. No, this was the constellation that had come to put an end to it. And then one day, the young warrior Choi Young-sun was cooking meat on a magic pan with full concentration, turning it over at just the right moment. The frying pan began to emit a strange glow, clearly hinting at its unusual nature. The goblin Otagon, noticing this, does not hide his surprise and asks the warrior with interest what the frying pan is. Our hero explains that it is made of adamantium, and even planet-eating bear meat can be cooked in it without danger. Otagon, the ruler of the goblins, scrutinizes the bubbling liquid in the pan. He notices that it also conceals incredible magical power, and asks in amazement what this substance is. His face expresses confusion as such artifacts are clearly not something common even for a powerful mage. In response, the young warrior decides to tell his story. He recalls how he met a strange constellation resembling a cow. At that moment, he decided not to fight, but to make a deal, to let the creature go in exchange for milk. Otagon still can't believe what he's heard, and asks again if the warrior really fought the constellation itself. The boy calmly explains that back then, he just wanted normal food, and he was willing to do anything to get it. Such events are familiar to him. He has been collecting rare ingredients in the abyss for thousands of years, and the star cow was just part of his journey. The treasure of Choi Young-seon's constellation is the mithril kitchen utensils that make an ingredient fresh on contact. The goblin ruler is still in shock. He can't believe that a guy who defeated a powerful constellation, instead of gaining territory or gaining power, just took the milk. It seemed unbelievable and absurd to him. Meanwhile, our hero tastes his dish with obvious pleasure. After taking a small bite, he smilingly declares that the result is perfect. When it is time for the meal, the warrior generously invites the goblin to join him. Astonished by this gesture, the goblin respectfully asks for permission to taste such a precious treat and sincerely thanks him for this rare opportunity. The visitor, experiencing the incredible flavor, sinks into a state of complete bliss. The food exceeded all his expectations, and now he realized that it was the best he had ever tasted. Thanks to the mystic constellation oil, the one who ate this meat was elevated to a new level. The magic circle activated, opening up a new circle of mana and greatly enhancing his abilities. The blonde-haired boy is perplexed as to what is wrong with the goblins, and after a few moments concludes that he doesn't understand them at all. He sighs heavily as he lies on the ground, looking up at the stars and thinking about something deep. His thoughts drift back to Earth, and he realizes how much he misses home, despite all his space adventures. Let's go back to when Choi Young-sun was an ordinary person. And here he is lifting a heavy barbell, lying on the bench, fully immersed in the workout. The teacher notices this, and moves closer to the young man. He reminds Young-sun that this is a Korean lesson, not a training session. But Young-sun kept practicing. From an early age, as an orphan with no one to rely on, he was obsessed with the pursuit of strength and self-improvement. He dreamed of becoming a hunter. Hunter is a profession that emerged in the Age of Abyss. It is an honorable profession where hunters fight monsters and protect humans from the dangers of the dungeons, constantly facing threats hidden in the dark depths. Cores and items dropped after killing monsters are highly valued. Artifacts from the dungeons where these creatures appear attract many people hungry for money and fame. Once again, Young-sun pulls the bar. His muscles tense to the max, drops of sweat dripping down his face. The boss urges Young-sun to calm down, but the man, full of determination, refuses to recognize the limit of his abilities. However, the boss is reticent to remind, even in C-rank dungeons, they can barely cope, and C-rank hunters often suffer losses. Therefore, B-rank is out of the question. Choi Young-sun ponders as he watches his progress. Skills, magic, martial arts, and artifacts dropped in dungeons all seem great, but despite their best efforts, people remain too weak. The guy ends up wondering if the only way to get stronger is to endlessly raid difficult dungeons. Young-sun shared that he gave up dating a girl for training, and she sent him to date monsters. The boss, sighing heavily, covers his face with his hand in utter bewilderment. A powerful explosion ripped through the dungeon, lighting it up in bright flashes of fire. A huge monster with a snarling maw and fury in its eyes rushed out of the shadows and toward the hunters. Its roar echoed off the walls, creating a sense of impending menace. Choi Young-sun reacts instantly. With cold determination, he strikes a lightning-fast blow, preparing to confront the monster. Choi Young-sun defeats the monster, breathing heavily after the fight. A martial arts scroll falls out of the defeated enemy. Meanwhile, the hunters discuss what is going on, recognizing that martial artists are not easy. Their stamina makes them good at being tanks and withstanding blows, but their attacks are no match for mages, who can do much more damage. Young-sun raises his whistle, hoping that this artifact might open up new possibilities, despite the fact that most hunters choose magic. No matter what people say about him, Young-sun has no regrets about choosing the path of martial arts. The true nature of these arts, where you get exactly as much as you put in, was perfect for him. The time shows 2:20 a.m., but Young-sun is still at practice, breathing heavily from fatigue. He realizes that it's not enough. Despite the long hours of training, the feeling of dissatisfaction only grows stronger. Sitting on the floor, the master reflects on the fact that he reached C+ rank through hard training, but knows that there are several martial artists who were able to become stronger than him. This thought encourages the young man to keep practicing. Suddenly, a voice is heard asking if Young-sun is awake even in his sleep, indicating his unrelenting focus. Young-sun, although he realized the absurdity of his behavior, still automatically tried to get out of it by saying that it could be called spiritual training. From behind a veil of dazzling radiance, a mysterious silhouette begins to gradually appear. Our hero, seeing this mysterious silhouette, asks confusedly, "Who are you?" But his voice only echoes in the void around him. His body tenses, and his mind frantically tries to realize what is happening. The voice continues to sound as if it were coming out of thin air, adding to the sense of uncertainty and anxiety. Silhouette introduced herself as the virtuous goddess of Libra, the embodiment of justice and balance. She realized that Young-sun was shocked by her appearance, but there was little time for explanation, so she got straight to the point. The goddess assumes a deal, her voice sounding soft but determined, as if each word carries a special importance. The guy unexpectedly agrees, which confuses him immediately. With obvious bewilderment, the goddess asked if the young man was sure of his decision. Her confusion was obvious. Such an important agreement required deliberation, not such a lightning-fast reaction. Young-sun then asks if he can get the power if he makes a deal. The goddess hesitates but replies in the affirmative, hinting at possible nuances. Janssen, however, with a slight and confident smile on his face, calmly declares that this is more than enough for him. The goddess reminds us that she has already introduced herself as the virtuous goddess of Libra. She raises her hand, illuminating the space around her, and demonstrating her power, claims to be able to see the future because of her gift. The goddess warns that in a few years a great danger will fall upon the earth. Evil constellations will begin their full-scale attack, and compared to this, the current dungeons and monsters will seem only child's play. However, Janssen is a key figure who can prevent the coming catastrophe. She promises to make him stronger, but warns him that the journey will be long and full of hard, inhumane training. At the same time, the goddess herself is well aware of the full scale of the task ahead, her tension betraying her inner excitement. To offer such a contract of this format was considered an incredible audacity. The contract itself was completely unfair and devoid of logic. Janssen's soul will be forever bound to the constellation, dooming him to a life of constant limitation. He faces a choice: accept this fate and become an avatar of the goddess, or refuse the offer. Constellations, always characterized by impatience, fight each other fiercely for the right to get an avatar. Conflict is inevitable, and each clash is accompanied by fierce battles. The goddess explained that time flowed differently in the abyss and on Earth. She prepared a training facility in this space, where Janssen would spend not dozens, but perhaps hundreds of years alone, honing his skills. After Janssen mentally compares Bezda's training room to the room from Dragon Ball, the goddess loses the thread of the conversation for a moment, frowning slightly, not quite sure what she's talking about. Noticing the goddess's confusion, Janssen decided to discard his comparison and not revisit the thought again, preferring to keep it to himself. Still, his thoughts were filled with the fact that this was exactly what had happened to the hunters who had become stronger. They had all made contracts with the constellations, receiving power from them. The goddess, realizing that the hero faces a difficult choice, offers him time to think, giving him a week to make a decision. Janssen, without hesitation, immediately agrees, which surprises her. The mistress suggests that he still consider his decision, emphasizing that where the decision is made is irrelevant. Janssen confidently states that he's not too attached to his world, and asks only to be allowed to keep the letter before accepting her offer. He agrees, emphasizing that he's always wanted to get stronger, and here, as a bonus, he'll even save the world. The lady invites Janssen to take a test that will be a crucial step towards becoming an avatar of the goddess. Choi Young's son, clenching his fists and gathering all his determination, takes a step forward, stepping into the glittering portal. He feels the air around him thicken, and the space seems to waver, taking him into its embrace. He felt the air around him thicken, and the space seemed to vibrate as it embraced him. Meanwhile, on the floor next to the heavy barbell is a strange letter with a red seal. It says clearly, "For everyone." Stepping out of the portal, Janssen feels the space stabilize beneath him. The powerful currents of air make him cough and cover his mouth with his hand. The ground beneath his feet feels secure, and the tension in the air gradually subsides. Choi Young's son squints his eyes and crosses his arms over his chest, looking around. He realizes that the concentration of magic in this place is far beyond normal limits, and its power is staggering. As Young's son looks around, he notices that the surroundings are like a dungeon. The uneven rocks, the dark sky, and the strange atmosphere seem familiar, but at the same time alien. Inwardly resolved, the young man clenches his fists, preparing to begin his training. Despite the lack of visible threats, he realizes that this place can be a challenge in itself. The goddess of scales was confident that this time her intervention was on time. She is surrounded by a group of angels, her faithful assistants, who watch her every move carefully and support her decisions. One of the angels remarks that Choi Young's son is the perfect candidate for the avatar role, and that he's the one who can do the job. The second angel standing next to him shares the same opinion, modestly supporting his companion in silence. The visions give only partial access to the future, leaving many events in doubt. However, the lady is determined to use all her powers to change the course of events and save lives. This is what Madame sees. Yongsong is practicing diligently in the vast void, honing his skills. With every strike and jump, he grows stronger, shattering rocks with powerful attacks. His training seems endless, and there is no limit to his efforts, eventually taking a stand against the huge monsters. Janssen successfully suppresses the invasion of the evil constellations. The goddess wishes to make Janssen her avatar, believing that his power will be able to withstand future threats, no matter how long it takes. The angels accompanying the goddess become concerned when they notice her confidence in the plan. One of them expresses his apprehension, sensing that things will not go smoothly. Meanwhile, Choi Young-sun notices strange changes in the space around him. He is wary, realizing that what is happening looks dangerous, and tries not to overlook the smallest details, preparing himself for a possible threat. Janssen is certain that this is a test from the goddess. His body feels like it's torn with pain, every muscle resisting the invisible pressure. But with his will in his fist, he decides to keep fighting. After the magic storm, the illusions that protected the Libra goddess's territory dissipated. This magic served as a measure of safety. But before Yongsong could realize it, the storm broke with renewed force, shattering the barriers. Not even the goddess herself could have foreseen this. The angels are concerned, wondering why it's taking so long for the hero to enter the citadel, even though he was left only a few meters from the entrance. The goddess is at a loss and indignant as to why the hero still hasn't entered the citadel, even though he was left only a few steps away. She doesn't understand how he couldn't find his way by simply walking forward. The goddess of weights has prepared everything he needs. Not only did she provide him with top-notch training equipment, dumbbells, barbells, but also added earthly toys, a game console and other gadgets so he could have fun in his free time. Angel reports to the goddess that he has checked the perimeter of the training citadel, but could not find the man in question. Upon reflection, he assumes that the magical storm of the abyss has cast him off in an unknown direction. The goddess, concerned about the hero's fate, orders Edquaniel to urgently go to search for him and bring him back. She realizes that leaving the man alone in the dangerous abyss is unacceptable and decides that it is necessary to rescue him as soon as possible. Edquaniel replies firmly that he will follow orders at all costs and will find the hero despite any obstacles. The endless void, subject only partially to even the mighty constellations, remained a place of mystery and chaos. Finding someone who had been sucked in by the magical storm seemed almost impossible. The violent mana flow could completely destroy his body. Our hero felt as if he were in the deep sea, even though he had never been there. Highly concentrated magical energy began to circulate through his body, controlled by his breathing. The magical power strengthened his body, strengthening his bones and giving him even more stamina and endurance. Our hero half-heartedly repeats that this ordeal is part of his journey to becoming an avatar of the constellation. The realization that the process is never easy strengthens his resolve. A few weeks later, the young man woke up lying on a rocky surface. His breathing was deep. His strength was fading, but inside him there was a growing realization that the first trial was finally over. A magical storm transported our hero to an empty corner of the abyss, free from the influence of the constellations. This place was isolated and did not belong to any of the powerful forces. Our hero encounters a massive creature emerging from the ground that looks like a giant stone serpent. He suggests that the goal of his training may be to defeat this monster. Taking a closer look at the creature, the hero notices its resemblance to the onyx from the Pokemon world, but realizes that there is a real threat in front of him. After assessing his opponent, he realizes that it's an A-ranked monster, which makes him wonder if the goddess has overestimated him, since he himself only considers himself a C-ranked hunter. Our hero, putting aside all doubts, decides that there is no point in pondering further. He fully trusts the plans of the goddess and is sure that everything has been thought out to the last detail. Gathering all his resolve, he rushes into battle with lightning speed. Our hero strikes a powerful blow towards the stone monster, but is surprised to notice that it does not react at all. Despite all the force applied, the blow didn't leave the slightest scratch on its surface. Realizing that it was naive to expect otherwise, he realized that the monster was much tougher than it looked. His face expresses disappointment, but his eyes still burn with determination to find a way to win. The young man promises to keep practicing until he can crush his opponent. In spite of his current setbacks, his persistence only grows stronger and his determination to win becomes even stronger. A bit of backstory. Many years ago, while still at the time of joining the clan of hunters, our hero receives a strange offer. One of the clan members received a martial art as a bonus at an auction. These techniques were unpopular and quite difficult to master, so no one was eager to learn them. Nevertheless, one of the hunters suggested that Janssen buy and learn the technique, because he was absolutely certain that through sheer perseverance and determination, Janssen would rise to the challenge. Our hero picks up an ancient book, explaining that he has always enjoyed reading about Marima. This ancient world of martial arts has always held a special interest for him. Yongsun knows that cultivating ki requires a huge time investment. He has no illusions about the speed of learning. Ci is a vital force for martial artists, just as mana is for magicians. Without this energy, it is impossible to achieve a high level of skill, because it is the basis of all fighters' abilities. Since damage was directly related to the amount of Ci, divine space arts, which developed slowly, were unpopular. In fact, Yongsun was not afraid of challenges. He was not looking for quick results, and was willing to devote time to mastering difficult techniques. The guy really liked the divine space art and decided to continue studying it despite any difficulties. The space fist technique was the most important element of this art. The moonwalk was an equally important technique. It made the fighter's movements light and swift, and the ki permeated every action, increasing its effectiveness. And another technique, the milky strike, was the use of ki to amplify attacks with the legs, making it devastating. These techniques combined to create a harmonious system where energy amplified and directed each strike. If this training is repeated endlessly, the young man will inevitably become a martial arts master. Our protagonist thought he had no talents, but he was deeply mistaken. His real talent is to endure fatigue and continuous effort. That's why he was able to endure 100 years of repeating the same thing. Yongsung repeatedly pondered whether he was really capable of becoming a B-rang hunter. He felt that he had no talent, and he often doubted his abilities. But despite this, he continued to train, hoping to one day reach the A-rang level like the most experienced martial artists. The young man thought of Li Shiwang, the only martial artist who had achieved A-rang. This hunter from China was an example of what could be achieved with enough persistence. The press once asked the master about his future plans, to which Li Shiwang confidently stated that he wished to become the first S-rank martial artist. His determination and ambition were evident to everyone present. Janssen's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a cryptic "Quo Quan." That wonderful loud sound came from the monster. Noticing the monster's heavy and brooding gaze, Yongsun felt uneasy, even though the fight between them was completely fair. After decades of hard training and cultivating ki, the hero had achieved significant results. Even the stone snake, which had previously ignored his attacks, could not remain immune to the damage it dealt. A tear slowly rolled from the stone snake's eye. The hero decides to spare the snake, realizing that he chose it as an opponent without its will. Now, feeling lost, he realizes he can go either way. Moments later, however, Yongsheng finds himself riding the huge creature, clearly enjoying this moment. His journey may have been long and monotonous, but now that he has climbed on top of this giant beast, the situation takes on a new hue. Janssen, sitting on the edge, suddenly felt a strange vibration in the air. When he looked around, he noticed a powerful energy vortex. The sound was familiar to him. The same one he'd heard when he'd entered the abyss 100 years ago. Janssen wondered if this was a gift from the goddess that would lead to his second trial. The stone snake reacted violently, expressing displeasure and threatening him with death. Janssen confidently continued to insist on his own way, not intending to back down. The stone snake was forced to obey, realizing the hopelessness of the situation. Choi Young-sun was lucky that he didn't die immediately when he was swept up by the magic storm. If he hadn't seen it as a test from the goddess and let the flow absorb his body, he would have been torn apart in the same minute. Janssen looked around for food, but finding nothing to eat, he was surprised to realize that after more than 100 years without food, the feeling of hunger had disappeared and no longer bothered him. Yet despite his lack of hunger, Yongsheng still had a strange desire to feel the sheer pleasure of food again. Janssen looked at the stone snake with interest, pondering whether its stone body could be considered food. The snake suggested that the stone could be considered its meat, and the boy decided that it might well pass as food. Holding the piece of stone in his hands for a bit, Yongsheng wondered if it was a kind of revenge for using the snake as a punching bag for all these 100 years. The stone snake looked at Yongsen excitedly, emitting a joyful quan-quan, as if anticipating his reaction. Janssen looked closely at the stone snake and realized that it had no hostility. The thought of eating the snake seemed unpleasant to him. It appeared that all the secrets of the stone serpent had been comprehended, and a new skill, a combat insight based on its movements called Stone Serpent Fist, had been unlocked. Stone Serpent Fist combined ground-piercing strength with the flexibility to move as if floating in the air. Yongsheng immediately tested the technique, feeling its power and fluidity. Reaching a new level of martial arts, Yongsheng rejoiced and felt his understanding deepen, revealing new facets of skill to him. Seeing a body of water nearby, Yongsheng decided that the next training session could take place underwater. but immediately stopped Onyx, remembering that he, being stone, risked drowning. As he immersed himself in the water, Janssen realized with horror that it was poisonous and was beginning to penetrate his body. His QI obtained through divine space arts was rapidly depleting. If the QI was completely depleted, his life would be jeopardized. Fighting the pain, Yongsung gritted his teeth and continued to move despite the poisonous water entering his body. Gradually, his body adapted, increasing his resistance to the toxin and allowing him to cope with the poisonous effects. The stone serpent remained near the shore the entire time, watching the ordeal with excitement and worry for his new friend. After a few moments that seemed like an eternity, Yongsun jumped out of the water. Breathing heavily, he realized how harsh and dangerous the oceans of the abyss were. After standing on the shore and catching his breath a bit, he looked at the poisonous ocean in front of him, pondering how he could overcome it. Janssen believed that if this was a test from the goddess, then surely there must be a way to pass it. But he was wrong. Onyx looked at him worriedly, as if waiting for an answer. Realizing that he had no other choice, Yongsung decided to focus on accumulating CI with divine space art to gather enough energy to overcome the poisonous ocean. Having already spent 200 years in this place, Yongsung was relieved to realize that he had become stronger, but he began to worry about why it was taking so long. Realizing that time flowed differently here, he still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Onyx seemed to share his anxiety, letting out a comforting quonk. Unexpectedly, a monster from the poisonous ocean appeared in front of Janssen, and he wondered if it could be considered a fish since it lived in the water. As he gazed at the creature, our hero pondered whether he would be able to cook it so that the poison would not pose a danger and he could eat it. Janssen struck the stone with force, shattering it into several sharp shards that could be used to make useful tools. Satisfied with his creation, Janssen decided that his kitchen utensils were ready for use. The young man began to cut up the poisonous monster. But suddenly he noticed that his stone tools had begun to melt under the influence of the toxins. Well, if cooking proved impossible, would the lad have to eat his prey raw like sashimi? The thought swirled in Onyx's head and elicited a startled reaction. Seeing Janssen's confusion, Onyx suddenly held out to him a piece of adamantium, a rare mineral highly prized among stone creatures. After trying to use adamantium for cutting, Janssen was pleased to notice that the stone was resistant to the toxins of the poisonous monster. Now he could use it not only as a knife, but also as a cutting board. Remembering his boss's admonition about the importance of hobbies, Youngson discovered the joy of cooking. He realized that cooking could be not just a useful skill, but a real source of pleasure. By combining his martial and culinary skills, Youngshung realized that he could kill two birds with one stone by cooking meals that would both keep him fit and help him develop his martial skills. After tasting a piece of the toxic flesh of the monster fish, Young Sun didn't hesitate to absorb the poison. His body absorbed the dangerous substance without hesitation. A moment later, the deadly poison was successfully neutralized, causing the stone snake to be visibly surprised. Yongsun felt a slight numbness in his mouth, but decided it wouldn't stop him from eating further. Soon he noticed that his Kai level was beginning to increase. Gradually, he realized that poison could also be a kind of energy. As long as his body was not completely poisoned, he could use toxic substances as an additional source of power. And so, the young man decided, he would now hunt down and devour every monster in this poisoned ocean, turning the poison into his power. Decades have passed. During this time, Yongsong has been transformed beyond recognition. His body and spirit have become indestructible, his mind hardened and fearless after countless battles with the creatures of the poisonous ocean. After gaining the perfect poison immunity skill, he realized that he was now able to resist any toxins that would break an ordinary person. Also, he is now able to release and channel the poison accumulated in his dantians. The goddess still hasn't called him back. Is all as well on Earth? Yes, such abilities would seem unattainable on Earth. The young man would already be considered an A-rang hunter there, but unfortunately, even that was not enough to prevent a catastrophe. Janssen realized that their paths were diverging. He was about to embark on a perilous journey across the water, which Onyx, being a stone-type creature, could not follow. Gently, the young man gently touched Onyx's forehead and bid him farewell. Because of its complete resistance to poisons, the ocean was not considered a threat to the Janssen, and now, the brutal sea monsters had no choice but to flee. Janssen became the emperor of this ocean. Diving deeper, our hero found himself near the source of magical power he had noticed on the first day. Now he could take a closer look at it. Stepping through the portal, Yongsong found himself in a new arena. Powerful bolts of lightning cut the air around him, but he confidently got down on one knee, ready to face the next challenge. Although it is believed that the bodies of people who have reached expert level already automatically prepare for combat as soon as they sense hostility, the unquenchable bloodlust inherent in high-level dungeon dwellers was now exclusively directed only at him. The huge demon grinned contemptuously at Janssen, trying to figure out what race the man in front of him belonged to. His eyes glittered with grim interest. His philosophy was simple. Any newcomer who set foot on this land should be shown at once who was the master. The Lord of Blood and Battles would not tolerate competition, and heads would roll to establish order. Janssen felt the atmosphere around him begin to fill with a harsh, brutal energy, as if this place was the most dangerous training ground. Concentrating all his energy, Yongsong formed a CI fist, preparing to use its power for a crushing blow. Janssen rushed forward like a released arrow. Our hero firmly announced his intention to pass the test, which further attracted the attention of the demons. Most of the creatures looked at him with disdain, doubting that an ordinary human could pose a threat. Their mocking glances and gloating laughter expressed the certainty that the man before them was but a weak mortal, seeking the attention of the Lord of Blood and Battles. But Janssen remained unfazed and kept moving towards them. The demons felt the man's confidence turn into a threat, and their taunts soon turned to rage. Furious shouts rang out from the crowd, calling for the immediate destruction of the enemy, and the demons rushed forward, confident in their strength. The dark mass of creatures rushed toward Janssen, determined to crush him with their numbers. However, as the first demon came close, a blinding flash of energy erupted from Yongsong's fist. The blow struck him in the chest with such force that he flew backward with an ominous crunch, flying apart. Horror swept through the ranks of the demons. They had clearly underestimated him. Janssen also felt the tension building as he watched the new wave approach. Realizing that there was no end in sight, he clenched his fists, preparing to fight again. He needed to take a favorable position to avoid encirclement and control the battlefield. Seeing a building nearby, Yongsong instantly assessed it as a possible hiding place. Bursting into the building with a jolt of his foot, Janssen briefly apologized to his host, realizing that he had intruded without permission. But there was no time for second thoughts. He would need this shelter, even if only for a little while. Inside, Janssen was greeted by a friendly host who welcomed him and informed him that he had just made fresh soup. Janssen looked around in surprise, not expecting to see a restaurant in such a place, and apologized with slight embarrassment for the broken door. The host suddenly offered Janssen a steaming poison stew, pouring a stream of poisonous liquid on him, burning the air with a green mist. But to his surprise, young Sun was unharmed. His body absorbed the poison, converting its energy into Kai. The system reported his immunity to poisons and his ability to control them. Smiling, Janssen sarcastically remarked that it was a nice diner. Once again, Yongsong found himself surrounded by a mob of demons who were eager to destroy him. They burst into the restaurant, filling the room with furious screams and chaotic movement. Undaunted, Janssen barricaded the entrance with tables and chairs, intending to use them for protection. Taking the chair as a makeshift weapon, Janssen grinned. He was ready to fight for all eternity. The system unexpectedly notified him of a new skill, a B+ rank Jusitsu specifically designed for chair combat. Smiling, Janssen realized that his resourcefulness had just earned him a new advantage. I knew it, he thought, feeling his self-confidence growing with each passing moment. In the midst of battle, Janssen realized that only mortal danger allows one to achieve a true understanding of strength. At the same time, in the sanctuary, the virtuous goddess of Libra was anxiously awaiting news. Doubts did not leave her. Could she, having entrusted him with such a difficult task, condemn him to imminent doom? Due to his heightened sensitivity after gaining martial prowess, Yongsong caught a strange energy emanating from the inverted cauldron. There was something powerful and unusual inside, catching his attention. The owner of the room clung to the cauldron, unwilling to let go, horrified to realize how much effort had been put into acquiring it. The mighty power of the cauldron did not allow life to be interrupted by such an insignificant death. In this place, its power was to endlessly resurrect the owner to continue the battle, so it was important to get the cauldron. The point, however, was that the winner takes all. Janssen had successfully taken possession of the adamantium cauldron and the restaurant. Or rather, this eatery. It all belonged to him now. Janssen looked proudly at the sign. The place was now called Kiri Kiri. Looking around the kitchen, he noted that the demon chef kept it in excellent condition. Now, with utensils, ingredients, and a spacious cooking space, Janssen should have had no trouble realizing his culinary experiments. Checking his supplies, Janssen found a large piece of meat that looked appetizing and hearty. When he tasted it, he frowned. The meat was poisoned. Every product he tasted turned out to be a kind of poison. Disappointment grew, and as he lowered his head, he wondered in despair what kind of place this was, where everything appeared to be poisoned, and if this was really all the demons fed on. After realizing that the poison had no effect on him, Janssen decided to use it as one of the ingredients in his experiments. During the day, he fought monsters to gain experience, and at night he tried out different recipes, testing himself to see if he was up to the challenge, and so passed long centuries in the diner, consumed by a succession of battles and experiments. A few centuries later, the former owner of the restaurant returned with reinforcements, fiercely demanding the return of his establishment. The demons burst into the room with him, determined to fight and sure of their victory. However, Yongsung was not going to give up. He showed his strength and skill in the fight, easily throwing one demon after another out of the restaurant door. In the midst of the battle, Youngsun felt a surge of energy and suddenly reached a new level. Through countless fights, his skills had developed, and he had mastered the A-rang ability of harmony of body and mind. With the acquisition of this skill, his body moved much faster than before. Although all martial artists strive to master this skill, it is not easy to achieve. Yongsung himself didn't know why, but he was able to attain harmony of body and mind through long, deadly fights. The demon army, exhausted from years of fighting, couldn't understand how they couldn't defeat one man. Even after 100 years, they remained powerless as long as he was protected by the walls of this structure. Realizing the failure of their strategy, the demons were forced to look for a new approach. At the same time, Yongsung realized that he had reached his limit. Despite absorbing Kai through culinary experimentation, his progress in martial arts had come to a halt. The demons gathered outside the structure and tried to lure Janssen out by offering him rare treasures. One of them, waving a piece of hollow beast meat, loudly proclaimed that it made his appetite swell and assured that such a meal would increase the characteristics of any warrior. The demon pub was both a refuge and a source of stagnation for Janssen. Isolation deprived him of the deadly battles that accelerated his development. Realizing this, Janssen decided to play along with the demons. Despite their obvious tricks, he walked out of the building. But then there was a new problem. An opponent of impressive size, who clearly wasn't going to concede so easily. Worried that at this rate, Yongsheng would not be able to progress in martial arts, Yongsheng began to act faster than the demons could react. He activated body and mind harmony. Before, in battle, he felt cornered and attacked haphazardly, wasting all the ki. That feeling of insecurity had completely disappeared. He was calm and confident now. It was as if the world was telling him that he was stronger than all the demons around him. You have learned how to dispel your opponent's attacks using the CI of the divine cosmic art and turn his power against himself. After a while, the demons brought prey again, trying to lure Janssen out of hiding. He went out expecting a battle, but his enemies suddenly retreated, leaving him bewildered. Meanwhile, gathered at a safe distance, the demons employed a new tactic, focusing their forces on long-range attacks, believing that his true power only manifested itself in close combat. The demons were stunned when Yongsheng was able to easily repel their ranged attacks using the CI of divine space art. Their attempt to keep a safe distance and avoid close combat was futile. Each blow dissipated in front of him without doing any damage. Over time, Yongsheng suddenly realized that he had somehow become close to these demons. After hundreds of years of endless battles, it seemed to have become something natural to him. After another failed attempt, Yongsen, leaving them with no further chance, calmly suggested that they finish the fight for the day and retire. To keep order, he even handed out numbers to them, promising to start a battle with the owner of the first one the next day. Janssen held up his A-Rang Hunter's card, a magical item obtained when he first registered with the association. For a long time he hadn't resorted to using it, but now he decided to evaluate his progress. The data reflected in the light surprised Janssen and strengthened his resolve. On Earth, he could only dream of this. A divine space art was displayed on the map. Yongsen was amazed that this skill, which originally had a rank of D, had increased so much. Divine space art. Immunity to all types of poison. Ability to freely control poison and gain Kai when absorbed. A harmony of body and mind. The ability to use the body the way you want it to be used. A Kazushi. The ability to redirect your opponent's power back, even if it's greater than yours. A Invulnerability. Skin becomes harder than steel and can block most attacks. Choi Yong-song didn't realize that despite his slow growth, The divine space art created a CI more powerful than any other. He had devoted over 1,000 years to practicing it, reaching impressive heights. Rank A, Martial Arts Specialist, indicates an ideal physique for learning martial arts. This rank also indicates a high affinity for Ki, and is usually innate to most people. Janssen realized that his abilities had probably come from the magic storm. The realization of his lack of innate talents only made him more grateful for the chance. Numerous fights have brought his understanding of martial arts to near perfection. Yongsung is now able to copy any martial technique at a glance, reproducing it flawlessly and accurately. The world responded to Yeonsen's presence, as if recognizing that he was approaching the pinnacle of existence. Youngsun thought the hunter's map had simply malfunctioned. He had no idea that this ability would soon cause widespread lunacy on Earth. Meanwhile, unaware of the hype to come, Janssen has turned testing new dishes into a regular ritual at his pub, tirelessly improving his culinary skills and experimenting with the menu. The demons, despite their initial bewilderment, participated in his tastings with curiosity. Gradually, those who used to eat to their heart's content stopped coming to the pub. And yet, demons have different tastes from humans. They find tasty what he finds strange. He realized that the only way to get stronger was to fight a new, more powerful opponent. And it seemed that day had come. One who far surpasses the weaker demons that Janssen had faced before entered the pub. Janssen pointed to the demon on the table, studying its features, and then announced the dish of the day, leaning slightly toward the demon and smiling demurely. Today we have meat without rice. The demon with massive horns called himself Varigoth, the first avatar of the Lord of Blood and Battle. His figure towered over Yongshong, exuding power and majesty, and his voice sounded confident and commanding. Varigoth pulled out a huge ingot of adamantium, a rare and valuable mineral, as a thank you for the treat. He looked at Yongshong carefully and asked with undisguised interest if he was really human. Varigoth said that his master, the Blood Lord, had been watching Yongshong's abilities for a long time. His dark silhouette loomed over the table, making the atmosphere even more tense. The demon then revealed the purpose of his visit. A powerful lord has taken an interest in Janssen's abilities and wishes to offer him something special. The Overlord wishes Yongsung to be his avatar. Varigoth was sure that the Overlord's offer would be accepted. However, contrary to the demon's expectations, Janssen politely declined. Surprise and rage contorted Varigoth's face. How could a mortal dare to reject the will of one whose power no one could resist? In his eyes, it looked like a defiant challenge that deserved punishment. He stated that a true warrior should not hide his fighting spirit in the face of the stronger. It is this quality, courage in the face of a superior enemy, that the Lord of Blood and Battles values. Janssen revealed that he had already made a promise to become an avatar of another constellation, but only after passing the test. This seemed counterintuitive to Varigoth. After all, usually avatars are already connected to the person they make promises to. He tried to understand why he didn't sense the presence of any constellation, as a true avatar should. Convinced that something didn't add up, Varigoth tried to hold Janssen back to make sense of what he was saying. No constellation will make an agreement with someone who does not meet its requirements, because the choice of avatar for constellations is an exceptional process dictated by internal motivations. Becoming desirable to one constellation often means becoming an object of interest to others as well, which increases competition. To avoid intercepting a promising candidate, constellations prefer to contract him quickly. They either immediately take him under their protection or train him on their territory, preventing him from going to rivals. The young man pointed out that Varigoth had underestimated his constellation. The constellation to which he had already made a promise had the ability to see the future. Janssen spoke proudly of the arduous training he had undergone, overcoming the trials of hundreds of years, starting from the moment he was captured by the magical storm. He claimed that all these trials were part of a carefully thought-out plan. However, Varigoth questioned the point of this training, stating that the magical storm of the abyss could not be controlled. He explained that not even the constellations could control this destructive and dangerous force. Janssen wondered why no other constellation was able to control the magic storm. But if such a constellation existed, it would have conquered the entire abyss by now. Janssen did not doubt the truth of Varigoth's words. Now that he had learned much about the world of the abyss, he was beginning to realize the true extent of the threats and opportunities he faced. For the first time, he had a question that made him reconsider his beliefs. The urge to cry overwhelmed him, but he suppressed it, realizing that tears would only drain his CI and weaken his spirit. Now Janssen realized that he was not in a training facility. He needed to get back to Earth now. He had already wasted 1,000 years. Varagoth, awakening to his true form and the power of the Blood Axe, declared that Yongsheng would not be able to leave the territory of the Lord of Blood and battles. Varagoth expressed regret at having to break such a gem as a human, but assured that his master was generous and would resurrect his soul at his will. Varagoth noted Janssen's special movement technique, which didn't feel like magic, but was faster than teleportation. Janssen explained that it was a divine space art technique using his CI, the moonwalk. Varagoth activated the blood baptism ability, and a sudden rain of what appeared to be clots of mana began to fall on Janssen, causing him wounds. Janssen realized that his opponent had tremendous strength if he was able to control such powerful mana. It became clear to him that his own invulnerability skill would not be able to hold the onslaught for long, and resistance was becoming increasingly difficult. Blood baptism created streams of scarlet mana that melted and destroyed everything it touched. This technique emphasized the insurmountable difference between Varagoth's power and that of an ordinary mage. Thanks to the harmony of body and mind skill, Yongson's senses were heightened, increasing his perception of danger. In addition to this, the skill martial arts specialist reduced his Ki consumption, which was vital in this situation. When the divine art of space unceremoniously warned him, Janssen realized that he was in critical danger. This warning was the signal for him to mobilize fully. Despite his opponent's clear superiority, Yongson remained cool and calm. The sense of wasted time and frustration that had recently plagued him had evaporated, leaving him fully focused on the fight ahead. The young man concentrated and felt confident in his abilities, remembering his past trials. It seemed to him that the situation resembled the moment when he faced the magic storm. Realizing that it was important to feel the rhythm and flow of energy, Yongsheng confidently plunged into this state, determined that he could dodge and survive. Yongsung gained a rank S skill, Incredible Speed, which gave him the ability to instantly move to any location he chose. This discovery inspired him, and he felt a significant increase in his abilities. The demon was amazed at Janssen's strength and skill, which allowed him to dodge the devastating spell, Blood Baptism. Until now, the demon had thought that martial arts were only studied by the weak, unable to master true magic. But now that he saw Yongsheng's determination, he reconsidered. In the abyss, where mana is more than plentiful, it is rare to find a race that favors martial arts. Martial arts are believed to require the expenditure of internal energy, which places limitations on them compared to magic. The demon told of a rebellion that had happened long ago, when a group of slaves had dared to defy one of the constellations. The rebellion was doomed. By rising up against the constellation, they lost access to mana, effectively signing their own death warrant. Varagoth chuckled, predicting that if the young man had relied on magic alone, his body would have melted from the blood baptism, and his soul would have gone straight to the Lord of Blood and Battles. Janssen felt the injustice of magic, against which his martial arts seemed weak. He searched desperately for its vulnerability, hoping that magic was not omnipotent in close combat. Did magic really have no weaknesses? For the first time in a long time, Yongsheng was on the edge. The opponent in front of him was so strong that the young man had to give his best. However, with each attack, its power increased. With his keys centered on one point, Yongsheng created a fist filled with pure energy and prepared to strike to kill the demon. All of Janssen's skills, such as Kuzushi or Incredible Speed, could only serve for defense, but not for attack. The main problem was the attacking power, which was not enough to break through Varagoth's many layers of magical defenses. To achieve his goal and defeat the demon, Yongsheng needed one decisive, powerful blow. Yongsheng realized that his CI fist technique was only the initial stage of CI compression, not enough to defeat Varagoth. Theoretically, it was possible to compress Qi into a material force, creating a weapon that could break through any defense. This technique, known as Qi materialization, was first mastered by Li Xiaowan, the greatest martial artist on Earth. However, he could only maintain materialization for a moment, as the process consumed a colossal amount of energy and was unworkable in actual combat. But Yongsheng had already surpassed Li Xiaowan, reaching a level that others only dreamed of over 100 years ago. The warrior realized that his technique worked, but cost too much energy. Unfortunately, one more use of the skill would drain his CI completely. The battle had not stopped. The Varagoth had been fighting for 6 months now, and this place was about to be wiped to ashes by such crushing blows. But Janssen used his incredible technique, the Cosmos Fist. Using the Aura Fist had depleted his CI, but thanks to the Dantian coherence skill, the energy began to recover quickly. In addition, the martial arts specialist skill helped reduce the CI's cost, giving him the ability to continue fighting. At the same time, the young man was still left in a hopeless situation. Despite being able to break through Varigoth's defense with his space arts, the key required for this attack was disappearing too quickly. The titanic demon towered over him, radiating destructive energy, and summoned the powers of the ancient curse for support. The Blood Lord blessed his army, giving it boundless power, and deployed a whole darkness of creatures in front of Yongsong, who were preparing to sweep away everything in their path with resounding laughter. But Young Sun did not back down. His determination only grew stronger despite the danger, and he continued to fight evil with courage. After a moment, Varigoth shrank in size, hoping to increase his speed, and immediately rushed back into the attack. Janssen quickly assessed the new threat. Loss of concentration threatened imminent doom. In an environment where enemies lurked at every turn, using all the Kai would have been a suicidal decision. However, he realized that the situation was different now. With a determination that pierced through himself, Janssen let out all of his strength, leaving not a single drop of reserve. Varigoth felt that instant. He realized that he had to defeat this man, or the consequences would be irreparable. If he fails, Yongsong will become so strong that Varigoth will no longer be able to damage him. Varigoth couldn't let that happen. To surrender here, in the land where the Lord of Blood and Battles ruled, meant betraying the sacred symbol of his great master's power. But, frozen in horror, he stared at the bright light that suddenly tore the darkness around him and found no answer to what was happening. Young Sun now realized that the Dantian was his inner world, storing the power and concentration of Ki. If he could channel this energy outside his body, the whole world would become his Dantian. A notice has appeared. Your world resonance has intensified, and the world awaits your defeat. Who does it apply to? Nevertheless, the young man did not give up, and so many of the constellations of the abyss who watched the battle became interested in him. The cat of lava and magma waves his paw at you. The serpentine of plague and darkness promises you a scythe. Realizing his plight, Varigoth admits defeat. After the victory, a glow surrounds the hero, and a message appears that he has defeated the first avatar, Varigoth, endowed with the title Lord of Blood and Battles, and wielding a bloody axe. The defeated Varigoth recognizes the hero's right to refuse his master's offer, thus emphasizing the significance of this victory. The demon strongly advises against being an avatar of the goddess, as the young man deserves better, to become the same constellation or deity himself. The demon's words puzzled Janssen, and he pondered for a long time, trying to figure out the best course of action in this difficult situation. After becoming a master and reaching a level where one accepts the world as oneself, Choi Young-sun began to feel things that he had not been able to before. He notices for the first time the gazes of the constellations watching him, and feels their powerful pressure. As he gazes into space, he realizes how powerful these entities are and realizes the magnitude of their power beyond his expectations. Every creature in this place hunts without leaving their territories to avoid losing ground, and so often operates through avatars. The young man challenged himself and was determined he would become a constellation. At this point, the hero recalls how once in training, back on Earth, he heard a story of a master in an interview. Toth said that everyone was jealous of the opportunity to contract with the constellation, but in reality it was far from colorful and beautiful. Constellation rules bind you, and you are under surveillance 24/7. Choi Young-sun now realized what that hunter meant. To be the avatar that everyone envies is to be a slave in beautiful chains. However, the young man has always dreamed of choosing his own path. He realized that Varigoth was right. He could no longer leave his fate to the constellation, having traveled such a long way. The young man did not possess magic, and did not aspire to study it. All his goals he intended to achieve exclusively through martial arts. Choi Young-sun was obsessed with power while remaining a product of capitalist society. When the lava and magma kitten offered him even more valuable minerals in exchange for a contract, the young man immediately recognized it as a ruse. He steadfastly refused the offer, deciding that whatever he aspired to, he would achieve by his own efforts. Looking around, the young man noticed that his pub was reduced to rubble, probably having suffered from the recent chaos outside. He quickly rushed inside, but stopped in the doorway, assessing the extent of the destruction and pondering what he had seen. Scanning the room with his gaze, he tried to find his adamantium cauldron among the debris. Gripping the cauldron on his shoulder, the young man left the room and traveled onward. At this time, the angel persisted in his search. When he noticed the two-headed creature, he showed the hologram and said that his constellation was looking for a certain person. The two-headed creature noted irritably that he didn't have to explain himself to this angel. The angel seemed to have lost his fear altogether as he covered himself with his constellation. In fact, the angel proved quite capable of standing up for himself, instantly striking and putting the two-headed creature in its place. Angel continued his relentless search, asking about Choi Young-shung to every intelligent race he met along the way. Now back to the abandoned sector in the Lord of Blood and Battles territory. The young man trained hard, honing his skills and increasing his strength to become a worthy opponent for the strongest of creatures. He spent long hours in meditation, learning to manage his inner energy and control his emotions in battle. With the attainment of the master degree, the divine space art had been refined. Now, the number of CIs no longer mattered. Choi Young-sing continued practicing his divine cosmic art, putting his whole soul into each strike. Suddenly, a notification appeared on the screen. You have continued to live as you should. The power of your essence has increased. But how exactly did he have to become even stronger to gain constellation status? The answer never came. The cold silence of the system left him alone with the question that continued to plague his soul. Practicing all the time and never losing. But couldn't he afford to lose just once? The task seemed daunting, and he liked that. It was time to get serious. The young man noticed a huge monster nearby and, looking closer, thought it might be his old acquaintance Onyx. As he came closer, he was surprised to note how much his friend had grown and, overcome with joy, hugged his massive muzzle. Choi Young-sun's old friend Onyx and his family were monsters the size of an entire city. What Janssen saw shocked him. The bastard that had just appeared was on a whole other level. A supergiant monster that has never before appeared on Earth. He radiates such a powerful magical force that gave Choi Young-sun goosebumps. His name is Hydra, the nine-headed serpent. Janssen's skills forced him to fight this monster. But even without them, his choices remained the same. The creature's poisonous breath was so powerful that even the constellations could not withstand its effects, falling to their knees before it. Now it was preparing to sizzle another enemy. Janssen rushed to the attack, delivering a swift blow that caused one of the Hydra's heads to be thrown back. But even that didn't stop the monster. The wounded head began to recover instantly. It was a monster that even the constellations feared. The nine-headed creature did not inquire about the enemy's intentions, but only pronounced a sentence, predetermining his fate. The monster's telepathic scream shook the young man's mind, making him feel like his head was about to explode. Fortunately, his perfect immunity to poisons allowed him to withstand attacks that would break anyone else. Janssen wasn't backed into a corner. On the contrary, he gathered all his strength, and with a decisive lunge, struck the Hydra with one powerful blow. However, the fight didn't end there. The wounds on the Hydra healed at an incredible rate, making it virtually invulnerable. This Hydra's strength was several times higher than Varagoth's, but Yongsun didn't give up. At some point, Yongsheng realized that the power of essence allowed him to change reality to his will, unlike ordinary magic and combat skills that only enhanced physical abilities. The constellations used the power of essence to transform the void into majestic kingdoms and bestow blessings upon their followers. With enough of this power, the constellations could afford literally anything. Hydra was a creature with a powerful soul and an indomitable will. With his current strength of essence, Janssen could neither shake her resolve nor change her will. But does he really need it? His real goal was not to change Hydra, but to transform his own essence. The Hydras realized with horror that their regeneration had stopped. Shocked, they could not believe that they had been defeated by such an insignificant enemy. Deciding to retreat, one of the heads shouted out, "Let's leave! We need to take cover in the cave and wait for the regeneration ability to recover." But to retreat in such a state seemed shameful. Weakened and wounded, Hydra saw no choice but to accept her doom. Janssen was showered with streams of hot, thick blood from the fallen Hydra that literally flooded everything around him. However, he had now inherited Hydra's karma. His body had become invulnerable and capable of infinite regeneration. The body of the fallen Hydra exuded an ominous, poisonous aura. The amount of meat was so large that it was simply impossible to take everything with us. The Hydra's bones could be used to create weapons and various items, and its tough scales were ideal for making armor. But more than that, it was a rare and delicious delicacy. For millennia, Janssen has honed his culinary skills while running the Demon Pub, and by now has achieved an impressive level of skill. However, even for him, this ingredient proved to be a challenge to prepare. The persistent Choi Young-sun, despite the difficulties, did not give up. and the result was very good. The meat was completely safe and did not show any poisonous properties. The young man treated his friend Onyx to a meal, and the dish was so much to the snake's taste that, eager to share it with his family, Onyx beckoned everyone from the little ones to his companion with care. Onyx watched Choi Young-sung while pondering his unusual character. Though it seemed at times that there was something wrong with his thoughts, the snake was certain. The man in front of her was a kind and strong man. When the snake and its family submitted to the young man, his essence was palpably strengthened, infused with new power. Choi Young-sun has finally realized the true intent of the constellations. Earth was for them an inexhaustible source of believing souls, billions of which could be used to fuel their might and give their patrons a power beyond all imagination. He realized that he had to find a way to return to Earth as soon as possible. The goddess's prediction of the future troubled him. Youngsun stepped into the territory that belonged to the Dream and Wish Master. In the same instant, the Master's avatars sensed the stranger's presence and rushed toward him. A moment later, figures in dark armor appeared in front of him, with huge black wings spreading out behind them. The young man was surprised to hear it referred to as a constellation. He thought this appeal was strange, for he had not yet reached such a stage. Nevertheless, those around him sincerely believed that his power and status would soon lead to elevation. These words of faith in his future deeply touched the young man. Such a confession was the most pleasant for him in a long time. Together with the avatars, they made their way to the master of these lands. Soon the conversation turned to Earth, and one of the companions noted that he had heard of many souls dwelling there. He even hastened to assure that they were ready to give him all the support he needed to take over Earth. However, the young man surprisingly replied that he wasn't planning to take over Earth at all. On the contrary, his goal was to stop the other constellations from subjugating his homeworld. Absorbed by the young man's pure and indomitable desire for perfection, the avatar could not hide his admiration. So sweet and appealing was this impulse. The young man quickly realized that these entities live by feeding on other people's desires. Their whole life is just an endless absorption of other people's desires. After a while, they came to a place known as the Dream and Wish Master's Chamber. Reflecting on the possible risks of the upcoming mission, Yongsun asked his companion to follow him and accompany him to the temple. He already had a plan in mind, to use the companion as a human shield in case of emergency, counting on the master not to allow a threat to his prized avatar. Nevertheless, the young man had a strange feeling, as if he had just awakened from a long sleep. He noticed his companion lying motionless on the ground. The approaching creature explained that that avatar was now immersed in a sweet slumber, absorbing other people's wishes and dreams with their willing consent. She noted with interest that the one in front of her was someone who had attracted too much attention already, and admitted that she had wanted to meet him for a long time. Slightly embarrassed, Yongsung replied that he hadn't reached the constellation level yet, and he had to work on that. To this, the child remarked that anyone who has set foot in the path of a constellation already carries within them the potential to become one of them, possessing abilities equal to their power. Janssen wondered if he had done enough, remembering the events that had happened here. 10,000 years of wandering the abyss and mastering the pinnacle of martial arts had not brought him satisfaction. Perhaps it was time to stop and find peace rather than strive for constellation rank. Janssen, slightly confused, tried to understand why the likes of his interlocutor would try to charm and cloud the minds of others. In reply, the girl explained that it was a natural manifestation of dreams and desires, for beings who entered this room found peace here, embodying, fulfilling their aspirations. And to refuse her gift will be able only to those who are able to awaken. The new character confidently stated that Janssen was confused, but was in no hurry to explain anything. The girl, who was either a constellation or a goddess, hinted that she would willingly clarify everything if she wished, if Janssen agreed to join their alliance. Janssen noted with slight irony that the alliance proposal was unexpected, but he is also saddened that all the constellations think only of themselves. The goddess laughed softly and said that the constellations were selfish and simply couldn't do it any other way. However, their selfishness doesn't always lead to loneliness or destruction. In some cases, it even allows them to unite. She recognized that mortals see them as gods, but even the constellations face challenges. If a constellation shows weakness, stronger rivals attack it without hesitation. Therefore, the need for an alliance becomes obvious. Some constellations are not satisfied with a future reduced to mere survival. The destruction and emptiness created by their obsession with conquest will lead to despair, where there will be no room for desire and nightmares will lose their power. Janssen reasoned that expanding the territory might solve their problem, or slaves could be found to take away their desires. Sighing, the goddess noted that the idea of a wish farm could only have come to the mind of a constellation that was once human, for only mortals can enjoy the limitless potential of desire that is unavailable to constellations. Just as brokenness and complacency are now inaccessible to Janssen, the goddess cannot freely control what is not related to dreams and desires, without risk of losing her essence and becoming weakened. The goddess also noted that nightmares feed exclusively on high three-dimensional desires, ambition and the desire for abundance, but not those desires generated by fear and suppression. Janssen wondered if she had revealed too much of her weaknesses. In fact, the mistress of dreams and wishes, after realizing her true intentions, decided to be cunning and make a decision only after seeing Janssen's desires. She realized that after learning the truth, he would be more cautious. In truth, Choi Yong-song radiated powerful desires, but none of them were about power or conquest. It was only the unquenchable desire to train. Choi Young-sun then asked what he would have to do if the alliance was formed, and if he would have any responsibilities. His interlocutor remarked that he was an unusual constellation, since he was more interested in duty than profit. As long as other constellations do not attack the alliance, no action is required. Duties, in her opinion, are meaningless, as constellations only participate in things that benefit them. The battles between them last so long that it gets boring. So no matter how far away each of them was, they always managed to come to each other's aid. Summarizing, the goddess suggested an alliance, and he, smiling slightly, agreed. As a newcomer, Janssen realized that the abyss was full of dangerous constellations, and decided that it was safer in an alliance than alone. Besides, allies could help him get back to Earth. Janssen was surprised by the name Alliance of Small Constellations, and questioned whether she was serious in suggesting it. It seemed to him that he was socially unaccustomed to understanding such things. Realizing the power of words for constellations and the danger of broken promises, he quickly assured her that the name was excellent, not wanting to appear displeased. A creature named Kitten of Lava and Magma greeted them. It regretfully noted that it would have been willing to help if Yong-song had become its avatar, but now considered his choice to join the alliance a foolish one. Recognizing Kitten, Yong-seon remembered their last meeting and was surprised to ask if he too was a member of the Small Constellation Alliance. Janssen wondered why Kitten was using telepathy even though he was nearby. Kitten explained that constellations rarely leave their territories, so alliance members communicate from a distance. Janssen compared it to a video conference on Earth, specifying that other members of the alliance would probably be able to join them. Janssen was stunned. Is there really only 2 in the alliance? The kitten angrily replied, "So what?" and threatened not to give out the prepared gifts. However, he soon changed his tone and said that he had heard about the gathering of adamantium and orichalcum, offering to make useful items from these materials. As it turns out, Kitten is a famous blacksmith of the Abyss, who is even willing to forge weapons as a gift for joining the alliance. At that, slightly annoyed, he warned that extra praise could turn this dumb constellation on its head. With a sudden radiance, Yongshong obtained 2 items, the A-rank Vampirism Key Martial Arts Scroll and Orichalcum Ingots. Yongsun, delighted with the new scroll, exclaimed happily that this martial art was capable of absorbing magical energy. His companion explained that Vampirism Key was created by nightmares, but only a few had managed to master the art. She added that no nightmare could become a master of this style, as most would prefer magic as a more efficient path. Then, noticing the collected adamantium and orichalcum, she asked with interest how long it had taken for such an impressive accumulation since Janssen had been immortal. Janssen estimated that it had probably been about 10,000 years. In response, the animated Kitten of Lava and Magma offered him his choice of desired weapons and armor. He proudly added that the materials he had accumulated were enough to create an epic sword and shield, and that he could make them in any design of his choice. The warrior pondered the offer and realized that this gear was a bit out of his league. Janssen stated in all seriousness that he wanted kitchen utensils, a frying pan and cutting board made of adamantium, and a knife and utensils made of orichalcum. Ever since the young man found his first adamantium nugget in the abyss, it had been his dream. Lava and Magma's kitten had nothing to answer, so he pretended to be dead. When he realized there was no way to avoid the request, he tearfully took the job. Janssen felt a slight embarrassment, as if forcing him to do something horrible. But a promise is a promise. Kitten will fulfill the request, putting his whole soul into it. The goddess, who had remained by his side all this time, smiled softly and said it was time to answer his question about waking up. The young man reflected on the fact that despite his powerful fighting skills, he was still human. It seemed to him that he had to take one more step to become a constellation. The girl, with a slight smile, repeated that she was sure he had already become a constellation. To his surprised look, she replied that there was no such thing as an incomplete or beginning constellation. You're either a constellation or you're not. The fact is that mortals very rarely become constellations. The goddess, for example, was simply born a constellation. Lord of blood and battle, like the kitten of lava and magma too. To them, being a constellation is a natural state, and the young men's misunderstanding of their true nature only causes them bewilderment and annoyance. So, awakening is the realization of one's nature as a constellation. This is enough, because all the important steps have already been passed, and the way to it was already the actual hard test. Yongsong seemed to be feeling disappointed after realizing that there were no more difficult challenges ahead of him. However, he soon finally accepted his nature as the constellation Invincible Training Master. His cry echoed throughout the world, awakening a powerful resonance and endowing him with a power that only constellations could access. As soon as the new constellation opened its eyes in the darkness of the abyss, it was immediately attacked. The creature that rushed into battle soon realized its helplessness and horror. The invincible master of training calmly watched from on high and suddenly bestowed a blessing upon his opponent. Confused at first, but then overjoyed, the creature expressed gratitude to the constellation and vowed to justify his trust. Janssen notes that he is now able not only to bestow blessings, but also to send messages, putting part of his essence into them. He also realizes that he can get the answer to any question if he just thinks about it. The goddess of wishes and nightmares, watching him with a slight smile, notices that Janssen seems over the moon with his new abilities. She cautions him, however, reminding him that with such power comes responsibility. Interacting with other people's avatars can be perceived as a threat or a provocation. To help him get the hang of it, the goddess advises Janssen, if he has an avatar, have him try to focus on it and feel the connection. The goddess tells him that the constellations can use their avatars as scouts to explore the abyss. Janssen, a little embarrassed, realizes that he unfortunately doesn't have an avatar yet. She also noted that it is possible to share the vision of allied avatars within the alliance. The goddess emphasized the importance of considering the abilities of one's avatars. For example, nightmares have a hard time controlling their desires, so she chose Aruni, the most reserved among them, to meet her guest. She then reminded that the hero had recently become a constellation and should avoid unnecessary conflict with others. In battles, the advantage is usually on the side of those with more avatars and more powerful essence. The protagonist reminisces about Earth and asks his interlocutor if she has heard of it. The interlocutor confirmed that Earth, a planet beyond the abyss, is known to many constellations. The powerful among them are eager to get there, for Earth is the source of rare and valuable souls so coveted in the abyss. The newly minted constellation, Janssen, tried to reassure itself with the thought that there were relatively peaceful constellations nearby, seeking to increase followers rather than war. The goddess of desire reminded him politely that not everyone was so peaceful. The goddess of desire politely reminded us that not everyone was so peaceful. His interlocutor offered important advice, knowing that the young man was eager to return to Earth. She warned that it was not safe to reveal his constellation identity. She emphasized that for his safety, it was best not to demonstrate the power of essence or draw attention to himself. He was suggested to blend in with the Earthlings, act cautiously, and gradually gain followers without attracting too much attention. With this approach, its penetration of Earth will go unnoticed, and when other constellations detect it, it will be too late. The young man mentioned in passing that there was a constellation on Earth that he knew personally. This aroused the keen interest of his companion, who at once inquired who it was and whether the creature could be trusted. He briefly explained that the story of his encounter with this constellation had to do with the virtuous goddess of Libra, who had helped him into the abyss. The goddess believed that despite this constellation's ability to foretell the future, its prophecies were only derided due to frequent errors in interpretation. Lava and magma's kitten, added with a chuckle. Beggars can't be choosers. In contemplating his return to Earth, the young man suggested bringing this constellation into the alliance. He was sure her help would be useful, though he was a little worried about how she would take the fact that he was now a constellation himself. However, despite his best efforts, he had made no progress toward his goal. This realization increased his anxiety. The young man began to wonder if he would make it back to Earth in time. In the meantime, the kitten of lava and magma was busy creating unique equipment for Young Sun, and the young man could only wait. Young Sun hoped that this weapon would help him fulfill his long-held desires. The avatar of the goddess of nightmares offered to show the young man beautiful places, and he asked to be taken to the fountain of enlightenment, which he had already heard about from the goddess. Janssen's companion confirmed that this is an important place for their training, where they learn to control their urges. Our hero decided that if he had to wait here anyway, it would be wise to take a unique training session just at the fountain, using this time to his advantage. This place was actively used for nightmare training, but with the birth of the goddess of wishes, it was shut down. It turned out that the training practice here is extremely dangerous. Many people went crazy trying to pass the test, the essence of which is to drink water from the well. The stronger the desire of the subject, the heavier the water in the well becomes. You can try meditation to get rid of the desire and make the task easier, but the water level will not decrease. The voice in his head began to list all the things he'd left behind on Earth. It reminded him of his old gym, his favorite barbells and dumbbells, spicy chili ramen, even the novel he'd read and probably never finished. That call clung to the simplest and most familiar of desires, trying to shake his resolve. Even for a master of training, this will prove difficult. The well stirs up desires, causing the bucket to get heavier and heavier. The kitten watches carefully and anxiously, questioning whether the master will be able to cope. He reminds himself that many nightmares have tried to overcome this training and ended up losing their minds. The young man feels a touch and hears a voice from the past. The girl reminds him of his undying love and proposes to be together again. All he has to do is let go of the rope. The images beckoning him to a new life with the girl seemed an illusion, devoid of real power. He knew, even if they got back together, it wouldn't change anything. For him, the ordeal was merely a physical exercise akin to weighted squats, a task he was prepared to handle. The goddess of desire was thinking about the constellations, beings with boundless power. As powerful as they are, they rarely have to restrain their desires. For why should all-powerful beings limit themselves? Does the ability to curb one's impulses remain only in those who were once mortal? He spent most of the day training at the Well of Enlightenment, trying to master its power. He spent the rest of the day resting, honing his tactics, and sparring with Aruni to test his skills in combat. The young man was an army man, a fighting constellation. But he also saw in him the latent potential to create avatars and establish a kingdom of his own. He was surprised at the possibility of nurturing avatars, but the goddess reminded him that he was a master trainer first and foremost, and so this direction suited him well. After training with him, Aruni became much stronger. Her mistress was truly grateful to him for this. The kitten of lava and magma says he won't do anything like that again. Kitten says he's finished, and now you can pick up the items. The boy looked at the sharp blade with interest. With its help, he could easily handle any ingredients, and if necessary, use it as a weapon. While thinking about it, he suddenly swung the knife, causing a storm of energy. The girl watched this with surprise and dismay, and didn't understand what he was up to. This knife forged by the constellation blacksmith required careful handling, for its power could inadvertently destroy everything around it. After the powerful strike made with the materialized key, not a single scratch was left on the items. Their durability was truly impressive, for they withstood a force capable of destroying anything. The young man looked at the items he had received and noticed that he wished they were bigger. A kitten nearby expressed his displeasure, adding that the size and shape was an oversight on the part of whoever provided the materials to create them. Choi Young-sun's short break in the nightmare world has come to an end. When he came there, he was still a human being. But after all the trials, he left the place as a constellation, having ascended to a new level of existence. In parting, Choi Young-sun expressed his desire to visit the kingdom again, sincerely thanking its inhabitants for their warm welcome. Avatars, enchanted by his culinary prowess, longed to taste his famous gukbap again, hoping for our hero's imminent return. The serpent bearer of plague and darkness was enraged to find strangers in his territory and demanded that the uninvited guest leave as soon as possible. Realizing the possible risks of the situation, Yongshong decided to harness the power of his essence for the first time, and he succeeded. Hiding his identity, Yongsun successfully disappeared from the constellation's line of sight. The world around Yongsun suddenly became quiet and peaceful. He was amazed that before, the flood of messages from the constellations had only overwhelmed him because of his inability to perform such a simple action. The Serpent Master of Plague and Darkness gave orders to all his avatars to find the Master of Training immediately, leaving no chance of escape. Soon, one of the avatars, a guardian of the territory, stood in Janssen's way. He stated that this invasion was an impertinence that deserved to be punished. The avatar offered Janssen to become his master's servant, promising that he would forget the disrespect he had shown if Janssen accepted. In response, Yongsun only grinned elegantly, showing his indifference to the threat. The Abyss constellations were well prepared and acted on a premeditated plan. The Avatar, noticing that Yensong didn't fully realize the seriousness of the situation, decided to resort to trickery. When he smelled the acrid odor of rot, Yongsun covered his face with his hand, trying not to give in to the pressurized atmosphere that filled his surroundings. The Avatar tried to lure him into a trap, expecting that he wouldn't be distracted by the stench in time to react. Impatience took over, and Yongsun demanded that the real herald of pestilence and darkness stop hiding behind the Avatar. It was getting harder and harder to keep his irritation at bay, and he was eager for a fair fight. Without waiting for a response, Yongsun resolutely moved into action. Taking a step forward, he prepared a CI fist and declared that if the messenger continued to hide, he would consider him a coward. It was, one could say, a declaration of war, marking the coming battle between the two constellations. The stunned mistress of dreams and terrors tried to stop Yongsun, warning him against further action. The kitten, watching this, indignantly declared that what was happening was pure madness, and added reproachfully, "True madness is to seek to control others without being able to control oneself." Yongsun suddenly realized that his actions might have been watched all this time. He admitted with a slight chuckle that he had completely forgotten about that possibility. After he became a constellation, his life changed, but he hardly realized it. To avoid the attention of the elder constellations, he stayed in neutral territory, away from their all-seeing eyes, as if hiding in the shadows like a coward. But now he faced a serious challenge, a confrontation with the herald of pestilence and darkness himself. To put his life on the line and fight such a powerful adversary was without a doubt a desperate decision. An ominous voice swept through the space, announcing that it was too late to retreat. A dark figure, shrouded in green mist, loomed over the battlefield. "Long life to the herald of pestilence and darkness. Punish the unbelievers," were the cries of the avatars, full of fanatical devotion. Their voices merged into a furious chorus, furious and ready to crush anyone who dared to question the power of their lord. The herald weighed the possible outcomes. Defeat threatened total annihilation, and he realized that if he entered the battle, he would gain nothing, and if he lost, he would lose too much. But by refusing the challenge, he risked status and ridicule. Doubts plagued him, but the pressure of the threat of his reputation growing made him lean toward the decision to fight. Yongsun realized that to win he had to act quickly, sparing no effort. If he didn't crush his opponent at once, the chance of victory would slip away. Tension was building, and gathering himself, Yongsun decided to use the full power of the cosmic fist, adding a bit of his essence to it, to deliver a single but crushing blow. Interestingly, the other constellations, and the herald of pestilence and darkness among them, very rarely dignified the enemy with personal participation in battle. His attacks were finally starting to have an effect, and Yongsun realized that the moment could not be missed. The glow that engulfed the heavens was like the end of the world. It wasn't just a battle, but a clash of constellations, eerie and mesmerizing at the same time. The smell of rot still filled the air, adding to the tension of the battle. Yongsun realized that there would be no easy victory. He was alarmed by his opponent's apparent weakness. It seemed to be just a ruse, and he was just waiting for the right moment to strike an unexpected and powerful blow. At one point, the messenger of pestilence and darkness, gripped by fear, retreats. Realizing the futility of further resistance, he humbles himself, swears his life, and begs for mercy, giving up everything to the enemy, including his territories and avatars. Yongsun watches in confusion as the herald of plague and darkness surrenders. According to Kitten, the oath of life is not just words, but a law they cannot break. Yet Yongsun is bewildered. How can beings of such great power be inclined to surrender at all? When the lava and magma kitten explained that a severe defeat could force even Constellation to surrender, Yongsun finally stopped the fight. The herald of pestilence and darkness swears on his own life and submits to the new overlord. Mastery skill activated. The power of Yongsun's essence has increased tremendously. Yongsun exults as he realizes that his martial arts are capable of striking even constellations. He could now feel each avatar of the herald of plague and darkness, as if their essences had become an extension of his own power. Yongsun suddenly feels uncomfortable and decides that ruling someone else's kingdom is not his calling. He nonchalantly addresses the herald of plague and darkness, informing him that he is returning his territory to him. Stunned by the unexpected generosity, the herald is speechless for a moment, unable to believe his ears. Although the herald is relieved, the thought gnaws at him inside that such an outcome is a rare mercy for the constellation world, where the winner usually takes all. Kitten of Lava and Magma is surprised, recognizing that he has never before seen anyone turn constellations into their avatars. He's sure it was a mistake to leave the kingdom and the avatars to the previous owner. Yongsan's technique was his greatest achievement. It allowed him to get so close to his opponent that he lost the ability to use magic and essence power. When the constellations learned of what had happened to the Herald of Pestilence and Darkness, they began to prepare for any turn of events. Soon, a powerful mid-level constellation, the Preacher of Truth, appeared before Yansong, accusing him of sin and warning him that the other constellations would not leave him alone. However, thanks to the support of Lava and Magma Kitten, Janssen was able to pull off the victory in just 6 hours. Janssen sat in front of the mysterious portal, wondering when he would be able to return to Earth. Looking at the shimmering glow, the young man decided that perhaps this was the long-awaited gateway home, and like the lottery, one had to take a chance to find out the answer. After passing through the portal, Yongsheng found himself in an unfamiliar world that stretched with green forests and majestic mountains. "Isn't this Earth?" he thought in surprise, looking around. Soon, Janssen spotted a village in the distance, and strange creatures, which turned out to be goblins, began to appear all around. Lava and Magma's Kitten explained to him that although this planet looked like Earth, it was actually a goblin world called Ephesus, their promised paradise. Janssen, though he had met goblins in dungeons, had always thought of them as common monsters. The goblins of the planet Ephesus, unlike humans, had been fighting the monsters of the abyss for much longer. Therefore, their defense systems and methods of confrontation were much more effective and elaborate than those of mankind. Now a monster comparable in power to the constellations has descended upon the planet Ephesus, a wolf named Borealis lupus, known for its ability to destroy entire planets. Terrified of him, the goblins began to doubt the salvation of their world. Odagon, king of the goblins, realizing that Ephesus was in imminent perdition, made his decision. He was willing to sacrifice himself to leave an unforgettable mark on the monster, a scar that would remind the monster of the resistance of the goblins of Ephesus. Odagon felt a strange unease and noticed an inexplicable light illuminating the battlefield. The wolf, startled by the bright flash, tensed up. Janssen's appearance stunned everyone present. Janssen is determined to stop the enemy, concentrating all his power for one powerful attack. And so he successfully defeated Lupus, a wolf capable of devouring entire planets, and everything went exactly as planned. The creatures that mortals feared to confront had a low pain threshold, as they rarely faced those who could match them in strength. However, if the enemy had withstood Yongson's last attack a little longer, or had been prepared in advance, this battle could have stretched on for several centuries. Choi Young-sun realized that he still had many weaknesses, but after looking at the surprised goblins, he thought that they probably wouldn't dare to attack him after witnessing his battle. When the other constellations were busy and left the goblins unsupported, it was Janssen who was the one to come to their aid and save their people. In deep gratitude, the Goblin King bowed before him, recognizing him as his god and lord. The Goblin Kingdom of Ephesus has now officially come under Janssen's control, and his power as a representative of the constellation grows as the number of souls who worship him increases. With the awakening of his constellation power, the world began to resonate with him, bestowing a new skill, territory belonging to an invincible god. Lava and Magma Kitten notes that Janssen's consciousness has become filled and enlightened. He adds that it would be wonderful if a similar process could happen to Earth. Janssen reflected that humans on Earth, unlike goblins, would not submit so easily, for they seek to dominate others by suppressing and subjugating them. He had seen many such cases, and so he knew that even defeating a huge monster would only bring him temporary fame, as it had before he left. However, Lava and Magma's Kitten hinted that Janssen was also a member of the species. The Goblin King had never heard of a planet called Earth, but was ready to follow the hero wherever he went. Assessing the remains of the defeated monsters, he suggested disposing of the remaining meat to make room for more valuable artifacts. Suddenly, the king admitted that he also possessed the magic of space, which surprised the hero, who immediately asked why he told him about it only now. At this moment, a powerful magic storm struck, instantly destroying an area the size of an entire continent. Although magical storms are quite common in the abyss, this one proved to be particularly devastating. Then the Goblin King asked Janssen if he had ever traveled with a magical storm. He explained that with proper preparation, a storm could indeed be a quick and convenient way to travel in the abyss. Because of its immense scale, A magical storm generates many side effects. Many, the realms of the abyss, are actually the residual effects of such storms. This storm, for example, will leave behind a dungeon. The part of the abyss with special rules contains dungeons connected to other worlds. That's where the monsters of the abyss appear. If they are not stopped, they can destroy everything in their path and wipe the earth from the face of the world. In the Mojave Desert, Nevada, USA, a dungeon called House Mirror Illusion has been discovered. There is a limit of no more than 10 people to enter it. There were exactly 2 weeks and 11 hours left until the monsters came out. In the meantime, the team of hunters called Hans had gathered all possible information about the upcoming opponents, received permission to raid, and had already set out on the mission. One of the fighters, recalling with nostalgia his childhood games, remarked that this reality bears little resemblance to the adventures of his youth. He noted that recently the world has been overflowing with unusual phenomena such as dungeons, monsters, and constellations. Since magic and monsters from the abyss infiltrated Earth, people's lives have changed beyond recognition. Monster cores saturated with magical energy became the most environmentally friendly source of energy, and by connecting the Earth to the abyss, mankind discovered a new way to extract it. C-rank dungeons are known for their large rewards. If you're lucky, you can get items worth tens of millions of won. However, such trophies rarely go to rank E hunters if their contribution to the raid was negligible. All participants had already entered the portal when the staff noticed something strange. One of the commanders was surprised to realize that the portal was behaving abnormally, as if preparing to release the monsters early. The portal suddenly began to change, taking on a menacing appearance as its shape expanded and sharp. Lifelike spikes appeared at its edges. The dungeon seemed to grow stronger and more dangerous. One of the staff realized that the situation was getting out of control, and thought with concern about the fate of the Hans team already inside. But it was too late. They could no longer intervene from the outside. The dungeon had clearly become a threat that the local services were unable to deal with. Once in the dungeon, the Hans team moved through a suspiciously wide tunnel, uncharacteristic of the usual narrow and dark passageways where slippery walls and cramped spaces carried the threat of surprise attack. The path seemed less dangerous this time, but that only made the fighters more wary. A little farther on, they saw a dilapidated structure that looked like an ancient temple. The tall columns and piles of rubble told of the once imposing appearance of the structure that now lay in ruins. The team leader ordered a thorough search of the ruins, reminding his subordinates to be on the lookout for monsters lurking around any corner. As an extra precaution, he authorized the use of augmentation magic so that the men would be ready for any unexpected attack. Coherently following instructions, the team began to explore the ruins, looking carefully into every nook and cranny and listening to the sounds around them. There were 2 paths leading out of the dungeon. The first was a safe exit that gave access to the outside world, and the second was a passage leading to the boss guarding the central part of the dungeon. In standard tactics for rank C dungeons, the fighters avoided searching for a safe exit, preferring to move straight to the boss to complete the task as quickly as possible. Team Hans detected the approaching monsters. The fighters instantly lined up in battle order, remaining calm. The leader assured them that it would be easy to anticipate the creature's movements. Soon, one of the fighters noticed that monsters were coming from the other side. The monsters were unexpectedly numerous. However, their commander, trying to maintain the team's spirit, confidently replied that the ghouls in front of them were just ghouls, and a few area of effect spells would be enough to win. A zone of effect is a type of spell that affects multiple targets at once within a certain radius. The team of hunters quickly realized that the situation was not in their favor. A huge army of monsters had gathered around them, closing in and surrounding them from all sides. Meanwhile, the Goblin King and Janssen were transported to a new area with the help of a magical storm. Odigon, watching his commander, was struck by his equanimity. The young man seemed to have gone through all the difficulties of traveling through time and space, remaining absolutely calm. The Green Goblin enjoyed the flight that magic made easy and natural, and marveled at her comfort. In the back of his mind, he made a promise to himself. If his master ever needed to master the magical arts, he would do his best to help him do so. At some point, the goblin, having heard his name and been instructed, rushed forward to survey his surroundings. The fact is that the constellations had the ability to see the world through the eyes of their avatars. At one of the sites, a stone with the inscription, "Underground Ration for C-rank Hunters," was found. This item was probably used to wrap magical weapons and was created by the same tribe that built the temple. Soon they spotted a huge horde of ghouls numbering several thousand. Odaigon offered to wipe out all the monsters. The goblin enthusiastically stated that with the 7th Circle Effect Zone spell, he could wipe out the ghouls and destroy the temple in one fell swoop. Janssen figures that a cluster of ghouls could mean they've rounded someone up. Without hesitation, the young man rushes to rescue those who may have been trapped. In the plaza, Janssen found a supply of earth food left over from recent events. Realizing that his appearance may cause concern for those who are stranded here, he realizes that there is a daunting task ahead of him to make contact. Yongsong explains to Odaigon the peculiarities of human perception and suggests that Odaigon change his appearance so as not to arouse the suspicion of others. Odaigon follows the advice and transforms into a human. Upon seeing the result, Janssen is surprised to note that Odaigon now looks like a perfect member of the human race, and his attire resembles that of a wizard. The goblin himself, without hiding his pride, adds that among his people he has always been famous for his beauty. Janssen noticed that if the leader of the ghouls had intelligence, he wouldn't just surround the hunters, but would act in a more deliberate manner. Perhaps the constant waves of ghouls were all he could organize. A theory has emerged that they are not controlled by a black magician, as previously thought, but by a monster named Tarun. The king of the ghouls, Tarun, was a monster made up of thousands of ghouls fused into one monster, and those who are focused only on finding the ruler of the ghouls are in danger of falling victim to his sudden attack. A group of Hans hunters have been in the Mirror Illusion House dungeon for 28 days now. Food supplies are running low, and every morsel is now shared with extreme care, trying not to lose a crumb. With only gloves and boots at their disposal, team spirit is severely tested. Already on the first day, the hunters lost some of their provisions. Luckily, they managed to find an underground shelter where they could hide from the gulls. One of the hunters remarked with a chuckle that if the rescue party arrived just after their surrender, wouldn't that be cause for regret? The partner chuckled bitterly. Good joke. Meanwhile, Janssen continued to hope that they would meet someone from Earth after all. Looking around the empty space, he repeated over and over again, "Is there anyone from Earth here?" As they heard the approaching footsteps, the hunters felt a flash of hope. When they realized that the rescue team was in front of them, they could not contain their joy. The long-awaited release was finally a reality. One of the hunters, Gang Yang, abruptly commanded everyone to prepare for battle. His partner, surprised by this abruptness, questioned the sanity of this decision. But Gang Yang indignantly stopped him, reminding him that orders from his superiors were not to be discussed. If they commanded him to jump, he should jump. If they commanded him to fight, he should fight. Recall, there was a restriction in the dungeon that only one person should be allowed in, so the sudden appearance of two figures was perplexing and unsettling. Janssen explained that they managed to get here by traveling through the abyss. After the gate was opened, many were drawn into the dungeons, from which almost no one returned. However, there were some lucky ones who managed to get out. The hunters, exhausted by hunger and all kinds of conflicts, looked at the two energetic strangers with confusion. The tired fighters had no choice but to accept the help of these strangers, even if their appearance seemed very strange. The strangers urged the hunters not to suspect their saviors so much, reminding them that they were all earthlings. One of the hunters noted Janssen's strange behavior. Since such an abundance of emotion was uncharacteristic of a normal person, he justified it that Yongshong was indeed one of the missing in the abyss. After learning that all the ghouls had been destroyed and the danger was over, the hunters were relieved to realize that they were facing a true great mage. Choi Young-sun decided to cautiously expand the number of his supporters, avoiding the attention of the Earthlings, and to begin by scouting the current situation on Earth. Janssen invented a legend for his young companion. He supposedly lost his memory when he fell into the abyss and now wanders around, knowing nothing about his past. The characters were surprised to learn that Janssen was skilled in martial arts. One of them remarked that he hadn't met a master of the skill in a long time. When Janssen heard that it was already 2039, he revealed that he had spent 30 years in the abyss. Choi Young-sun lightly kicked a piece of stone. Then, tossing it confidently in the air, he crumbled the stone into even pieces, making a plate for everyone. When the group saw the strange meat, they warily inquired about its origin. Janssen, with a slight smile, reminded them of the show Survival at Any Cost, which said that humans were capable of eating almost anything. He added that the knowledge from the broadcast was useful to him, and because of it he survived the abyss. At first, the people doubted whether to eat the meat that the one who had returned from the abyss had given them. But the enchanting flavor quickly convinced them. Being ravenous, they took it as a veritable feast, savoring the taste with great joy. After the first bites, they realized that the meat had unusual properties. One of them began to regain magical energy, which increased the gratitude among the guests. Janssen revealed that the dungeon is set up in such a way that the ghouls here are not just regular monsters, but a mob that unites into a boss. In order to clear the dungeon and find a way out, you need to destroy all the remaining ones. Odaigun observed that after being locked up for a long time, the crew members began to clash and even tried to destroy each other. However, after seeing a strong hunter capable of leading others into high-ranked dungeons, some of the team began to look at him with respect, like an honorable elder. Janssen, jokingly agreeing that after 30 years in the abyss he could indeed be considered elderly, suggested that he still be guided by his earthly age of 28. Choi Young-sun noticed that despite his superiority over Odaigun, the others kept closer to the mage. The reason soon became clear. Everyone knew that Young-shung was a martial artist. Although this path was considered weaker than magic, some hunters, including Janssen, still dedicated themselves to the martial arts. In 2009, when Young-shung fell into the abyss, the martial arts were in decline. But the remaining masters gathered their disciples and established a revival center in China. Their efforts breathed life into a new era of martial arts, albeit less powerful than magic. At one point, Master Li was involved in a scandal involving rank manipulation. In 2011, similar cases began to surface in various countries, including China and Russia. It turns out that hunters bribed judges to increase their ranks. Thus, hunters of rank C became hunters of rank B, and those who were in rank B moved to rank A and pretended to be heroes. Goddess of Nightmares decided to try and foresee the consequences. As a result, martial arts lost popularity and prestige. Schools closed, and masters lost credibility. The martial arts lost their popularity and prestige, and the masters lost credibility. Janssen is very sad and tries to calm his ki, realizing that sadness only weakens his body. He also asks if all is quiet on Earth and if there has been a constellation invasion. Some members of the hunting team speculate that he's talking about the 2011 disaster. Then, in the fall, during the rank manipulation scandal, an unusual gate opened in one of the cities, releasing monsters with intelligence. It was an entire army, and its goal was to take over the Earth and subjugate human souls to the constellation. The giant demons, acting on a clear strategy, rained down on the cities, and people, panic-stricken, tried desperately to escape. When the invasion began, the countries mobilized their best hunters. The battles were fierce, and the casualties were huge, but the hunters fought back against the demonic army and were able to stop the invaders. After realizing that the invasion has been repelled, Janssen is confused and wonders why he went through all the trials and wanderings of the abyss. He begins to have doubts about the goddess's prophecy. Perhaps it was wrong, or perhaps the goddess herself miscalculated. Constellation Coda shares that confronting the constellations is incredibly difficult. It's not just a skirmish, but a full-blown invasion in which the forces of mortals are negligible. Even if there were many hunters, they would only be a minor nuisance to the constellations. Everything that was happening at once seemed strange and illogical to Janssen. However, if the constellations were on Earth originally, what is happening makes sense. Usually they operate through avatars, but they would have to fight against him personally. Perhaps that's why the truce is still in place. The invasion of the constellations upset the previous balance of power and led to the conjunction of the abyss with Earth. To avoid a full-scale war, the parties made a compromise. However, the truce cannot last forever. There remain many other constellations in the abysses that may decide to invade. Kitten warns to be careful of the new constellations. They are unlikely to honor the terms of the truce. This means that if the situation worsens, the Earth will turn into a battlefield where the constellations will start fighting for dominance over the planet. The team marveled at Odagon's skill. His magic was amazingly precise and powerful. They discussed how much he surpassed the other First Circle mages in speed, strength, and intuition. None of them had ever met anyone with such abilities as Odagon's. But he himself thought discreetly to himself that the people around him just seemed to have lost their minds. The group members were discussing the possibility of poaching a new ally who had lost his memory. They were considering the option of convincing him to leave Janssen and join them. Their plan was to replace him in the main position. That way they would no longer have to obey Richard. Janssen noticed that Odagon looked tense, as if preparing for a fight, and began to worry about his condition. Reflecting on his condition as well, he began to suspect that the long stay in the abyss might have negatively affected his thinking. A great battle between the constellations could break out here, and any show of force could provoke conflict. If he did not carefully conceal his identity and capabilities, he would have to face serious consequences. After returning from the abyss, people are usually sent for medical examinations and thoroughly questioned about their experiences. One such returnee, gripped by genuine terror, describes what he saw in the abyss: a giant cat with a frighteningly wide smile. Ever since the evil constellations invaded the world, most countries have imposed a ban on becoming their avatars for fear of increasing dark forces. However, there are those who, despite the risk, dare to embrace their power, seeing it as an opportunity to gain the power given directly by their sinister masters. So, Janssen has gathered enough information about the current situation on Earth, but he is also interested in the skill level of the local hunters. He wonders how he can find out. The Alliance informs him of the level assessment spell, which reveals the level and characteristics of the target. This should be enough to assess the hunter's abilities. To assess what's going on, our hero uses the Eye of Sauron ability. Young reveals the essence of Richard Parker, noticing characteristics such as level, strength, agility, physical and magical power, and intelligence. The cat, observing the process nonchalantly, notes that such a task does not require much effort. Meanwhile, House Mirror Illusion has been successfully mopped up, causing a noticeable sense of relief amongst those involved in the operation. Soon the young man is questioned about his origins in order to resolve citizenship issues upon his return. Upon learning that he is Korean, he is informed of his impending new citizenship. Janssen returns to Earth. Dazzled by the bright light, he looks up at the long-forgotten sky and rejoices at this familiar sight. Since the people on the ground didn't know about the Tarun Ghoul King, they had no idea that they had passed the A-Rang dungeon. The heroes learn that a guy named Richard, the captain of the team they met in the cave, belongs to the royal family, although he himself has never hinted at it. One of the heroes wonders why Richard hid his origins. Janssen marvels that despite his limited knowledge of English, he understands the text as if he has the ability to see its essence. Though of course something sublime like a constellation could not understand the language of mortals. Doctors tell Janssen the results of his tests. He is completely healthy and mentally stable, which is rare after such an ordeal. One of the doctors notes his excellent physical shape, adding that such a body is as if given by fate itself. Janssen modestly explains that in the abyss, he had only one way to keep himself occupied: training, which is how he got in this shape. The doctor, recalling the 30 years spent in a different reality, warns that rehabilitation will not be easy and advises him to consider moving to another country to adapt. Agents representing the American government assure Odaigon that his memory loss should not bother him, as they are on his side. They emphasize the power and influence of the United States, calling the country the richest and strongest. However, the young man declares that he will follow Mr. Choi Young-sun, expressing his loyalty. The agents ask Choi Young-sun if he has ever considered moving to another country, and promise help from the US government if he decides to make the move. They claim that there is no country better than America for a hunter. This attitude is very different from what it used to be. A group of agents discuss what to do about Janssen using a telepathy artifact to communicate. Odaigon offers to use his magic to learn their conversation, and Janssen agrees. In the conversation, the agents mention that they are going to convince Janssen to stay in America after he gets his green card, as they believe he will soon appreciate the benefits of the country. The agents also mention a mage named Odaigon, fearing that other countries might try to get information on him. To prevent this from happening, they intend to place spies near Odaigon to isolate him and prevent others from getting close. Odaigon informs Janssen that the agents are planning to follow them. To avoid complications, however, Janssen asks him not to take drastic measures, hinting that Odaigon should realize where such a conflict could lead. In order to obtain a hunter's green card, Janssen has to undergo a number of additional procedures. He is asked to answer questions about his past experiences and contracts with otherworldly beings. The first question concerns a possible contract with the Madness and Blood Warrior constellation, and the second involves writing a snippet describing the creature. Janssen realizes that, despite the childish format, such methods are effective in revealing contracts, for a servant of a constellation will not be able to mock his master. In testing, Janssen is asked to pour as much mana into the crystal ball as he can. Young-Son concentrates, and the orb begins to glow brighter and brighter until it cracks from the excess energy. Seeing the result, Young-Son ponders that his power must be rated higher than before, which will surely open up new possibilities for him. The hunters in the exam fill the crystal ball with mana, and it changes color, showing the total amount of their energy. But despite his best efforts, The young man is disappointed to see that his level has not increased. Janssen has to control his power so he doesn't stand out, since things are different on Earth than they are in the Abyss. His friends in the Alliance worry that the extra attention might reveal his true nature. It was important to take every chance to raise the hunting rank and reach heroic level for more glory. All measurements are completed, and he is asked to wait in the dormitory for the results. After a while, Janssen gets his results. His rank remained at C+, and his age was listed as 57, which confused him a bit. Odagon, on the other hand, managed to hide his abilities, and his rank was at B level. The captain of the team named Richard met our heroes and reminded them that he promised to thank them for the rescue. He suggested that after 30 years in the other world, Janssen might not have a permanent home, and offered to let him stay with him for as long as necessary. Earlier, the goblins meeting Janssen also tried to thank him for saving them. One of them suggested an acid slime bath, assuring me that it would perfectly exfoliate rough skin and relieve fatigue. The other, overflowing with enthusiasm, happily tried to hand Janssen his children to sacrifice, which further embarrassed the hero. And the Goblin King, Odagon, is only now realizing how much cultural differences can be an inconvenience. As they drove along, Janssen decided to make a joke, telling Richard that he would wait for him to give him his entire fortune. Of course, he immediately added that it was only a joke. He didn't need much. Odagon, accustomed to royal standards, was a little embarrassed that Richard was so proud just for providing his lodgings. Janssen, knowing the realities of Earth, explained that here the owners of great wealth could afford not such arrogance. When the car was suddenly blocked, the crew became wary. For a moment, Janssen thought it was an assassination attempt. Perhaps one of the evil constellations had revealed his true nature. Odagon said judiciously that if he had been a serious opponent, he would have shown himself openly by now. Yongsheng agreed. But first he decided to find out who the brave man was, who dared to stand in their way. Upon noticing the driver, he immediately realized that although he was immortal, his strength clearly set him apart from ordinary humans. The stranger could hardly believe his eyes when he saw Young Sun. He had not expected to meet him, but it was Old Man Huang. Our hero realized that Dragon Huan himself was in front of him, a legendary S-rank hunter and the leader of a clan that had long been rumored. When he heard that this was the 19th time Huang had been married, Young Sun was stunned. For such a large number of marriages seemed unthinkable. Huang, after inquiring about Yeonsong's progress and comparing their overall chances, suggested that they take their time, reminding them that their strength was still in no way sufficient for a B-level dungeon. In 2011, the world faced massive attacks by evil constellations, and Seoul was no exception. These events, later dubbed the Seoul Disaster, were a real disaster for the city. All the hunter clans within Seoul responded to help, ready to fight the monsters and protect the residents. The leader of the great and incomparable clan, Hwang Kyungrung, was one of those desperate to save the country by putting all his strength into fighting the attack. All of the hunters who fought the threat were honored as heroes, but other than that title, they never received any other award. Hwang once raised the issue of compensation for medical treatment for hunters, but was told that the requirements for such support were too high. Few hunters could afford long recovery times. In addition, his case was considered inappropriate because the injury was a shrapnel wound and had not been sustained in a battle with a monster. Realizing that there was no support at home, Hwang moved to America, where the attitude towards hunters was much more favorable. There he got funding, started monster hunting, promoted his own company, and even got on TV. So, step by step, he built his new life. Now, looking at his interlocutor, Hwang noted with a chuckle that he hadn't changed at all. You couldn't get a word out of him with a pincer. Janssen's long absence had led many to believe that he was truly missing. Some were seriously considering announcing his death, since only a few returned from the Abyss. The clan members even began to discuss the possibility of holding a wake. When Hwang saw his name on the list of returnees, he couldn't hide his surprise. No one had expected him back. Hwang, after scrutinizing Richard, finally asked the question that had long interested him. What was this guy doing in his car? Richard explained that Janssen had saved his life, and now he sought to repay him for it. America, Los Angeles, 30 years later. The City of Angels has changed beyond recognition over the years. Its streets are now filled with all sorts of machinery, and since the gates opened, rich and famous hunters from all over the world have flocked here. At this point, Los Angeles has become the most hunter-populated city on the planet. Hwang, who had settled here, made sure that he was the first to receive news of those returning from the Abyss. He enjoyed watching the stone-faced FBI and CIA agents give him regular reports. When young Sun, surprised by such attention from the intelligence agencies, asked if they were really making such exceptions for his sake, Huang only chuckled, noting that changing his citizenship would be a huge loss for these organizations. Young Sun looked around the Huang's house and could not help but notice its imposing size. When he saw the servants walking around the house, he could not help but marvel at the wealth and scale of the residence. Huang, noticing his interest, nodded toward the long line at the entrance and grinned, explaining that all these people were waiting to meet him, if only for a moment. They even had to get special coupons to get in. When Young Sun asked in surprise why all these people needed to see him, Huang noted with a slight irony that to many people he was almost a legend, a man who had been to the abyss and returned. Huang, having assembled all his secretaries, demanded that they select the best teachers to train Yongsong. He wanted his friend to have a well-rounded education and in-depth knowledge in important fields. Janssen was literally stunned by the scope of the program, which included politics, economics, culture, law, modern history, and even social education. Huang boasted that he pays his subordinates the highest salaries, but sets strict conditions. The slightest mistake, and they are immediately fired. Yongsong objected, asking if it was necessary to behave like that, if it was better to be a role model, as a clan leader should be. The Stanford University professor, a specialist in artifact science and cave exploration, began the lecture by introducing herself and mentioning her experience as a manager of 2 rank B hunters and 1 rank A hunter. Turning off the lights and turning on the projector, she added that there had been tremendous changes in the 30 years since the gate had been opened, and offered a brief overview of all the events that had affected the world. To this, Janssen remarked that he could lift a 500-pound barbell in high school, and the teacher smiled and nodded in response, apparently respecting his achievement, though realizing that this was somewhat different from the topic of the lecture. The screen showed maps and reports of evil constellations occupying large areas around the world. Yongsan tried to reproduce the main regions: China, North Korea, Europe, and Latin America. The teacher nodded in satisfaction and praised him for his quick learning curve. The map showed that South Korea had remained unconquered despite extensive invasions throughout the region. The girl explained that this was due to the fact that Korea was able to swiftly deal with the threat and resolve the situation among the first. The clan leader had always seemed like a simple, even good-natured man. But what did he have to endure along the way? The one who was abandoned by women, who faced betrayal on a daily basis, and yet talked others out of taking unnecessary risks, eventually became the legendary Dragon Huan, an S-rank hunter who made a fortune. After the lengthy lecture, Young Sun went for a walk around the residence with Huang. Along the way, reflecting on what he had recently heard, Janssen wondered curiously if the magic of the underside of the world had really been taught to him by the constellation. Huang replied with a slight chuckle that the technique was known to many, hinting that he wasn't the only bearer of it at all. However, it was possible that someone had actually received this knowledge from a constellation that might even be plotting something insidious. Looking at the training equipment, Huang noted that with such equipment, all hunters on the planet would be at full strength. Janssen, a little surprised, explained that these devices are for sports training only. However, Huang only grinned, reflecting to himself that ordinary sports were a thing of the past. Now at the forefront of the entertainment industry was hunting sports, where trials and dangers had become a spectacle. The competition, in which teams of 6 hunters fought each other, included everything from monster slaying and temporary attacks to deadly battles. There were many rules, and each challenge was fraught with danger and required the utmost exertion of strength. When Huang, watching, wondered if his companion realized this, they were suddenly on the other side of reality, the underside of the world. Janssen scrutinized the sight, noting that the magic created by humans could hardly compare to the power of the constellations. The screen revealed that with limited power on the seamy side of the world, the creature was capable of awakening its true power. Feeling the increased strain, as if his body was weighed down by weights, Yongsong realized that this was just part of the workout. He took a few steps, immersed in his thoughts. The kitten of lava and magma revealed that thanks to the protection in the dungeons and on the underside of the world, the other constellations cannot spy on him, so he is free to use his abilities. This provided a potential opportunity to reveal one's essence to the leader and offer him the role of avatar. However, Janssen was more accustomed to acting on his own, assuming the role of a fighter and engaging in battle directly. On the underside of the world, trials for hunters were seen as real battles. Janssen was surprised to see that the hunters were not practicing in the dungeons, but just fighting each other. Huang reminded us that this is not a workout, but a true competitive sport. In this sport, the strongest hunter is determined through one-on-one duels. It is enough to see Ince once, and all other sports fights will seem incredibly boring. In the abyss, Janssen was undaunted and anxious to return to Earth to make sure it was safe. Just then, he learned that the Earth Hunters had become stars of sports competitions, which made him surprised and indignant. If they were busy fighting in the arena, when did they have time to fight monsters? Huang said that many hunters now don't even go down to the dungeons, preferring the arena for money. Becoming a successful athlete can earn you a fortune enough to last a lifetime. Before explaining his intentions, Yongsong asked for an increase in Yznanka's power, as the limitation of his strength was preventing him from training to his full potential. Huang explained that the training room was designed for rank A hunters. Due to the lack of opportunity to display combat skills, Yongsong focused on developing his internal energy, but it wasn't enough, hence his C+ rank. Realizing that his friend was eager for an explanation as to how he ended up in the abyss, Janssen shared that his journey and all the trials he had undergone were all about one thing: protecting the Earth. The friend was puzzled. Yongseon had wandered into the abyss, become a constellation, and now he had returned to protect Earth? He was indignant, questioning the veracity of the story, and reminded him that many who had returned from the abyss had lost their minds. Janssen offered to prove his story by demonstrating strength. He added that he didn't care about others' opinions, but with his friend he wanted to share the truth. The trainer warns Janssen that no matter how strong he is, he has yet to fight S-rank hunters. During his last test, he was on the verge of death when he gained an A+ rank skill, the ability Raise Level Through Death. The coach suggests that Janssen test his strength in a duel, and asks if he is familiar with such a rare artifact as a tattoo with magical properties. He uses his magic projectiles, attacking with an intensity that doesn't allow his opponent to catch his breath. As the inaugural UNC League champion, Coach knows that the best way to overpower an opponent is to force them to go straight to defense by attacking first and not allowing them to recover. Then the young man activates the Kai defense barrier, creating a powerful energy field around him, ready to repel attacks. Young Sun notices that Kai's barrier is absorbing too much energy, draining him. As he controls his powers, he realizes wistfully how long it's been since he fought like a normal person. Our hero resolutely gathers all his power, showing off his maximum. A bright light flashes around him, accompanied by a deafening, amplified explosion. The opponent tries to use the fast teleportation technique, but it is suddenly interrupted before it can be activated. Baffled, he can't understand how Yongshong manages to use his abilities so quickly and effectively. The trainer, seeing no other option, decides to strengthen his body with magic, preparing for a decisive clash. Yongshong easily intercepts him, however, rebuking him for trying to move into close combat against someone with martial arts skills. I wonder what the highest level in martial arts is. Yongsun had the supreme level, and with further development one can go beyond the capabilities of a mortal. Huang gazes at his friend and asks again if he is really Constellation, to which he receives an affirmative answer. Like a constellation, he decided to ask for help, and after gathering his thoughts, he began to explain the situation in detail. New constellations could emerge from the abyss at any moment. Perhaps their goal is to take over Earth, taking advantage of our trust. The older brother has mixed feelings. Realizing that his friend has been on the line of defense and has been fighting for tens of thousands of years, he feels ridiculous trying to be authoritative only at the expense of age. Having decided to help the junior, he persuades him, albeit with some doubt, to accept the offered help by pointing out his current situation. Having felt the support, the younger person is inclined to accept the help. The lava and magma kitten is very pleased with Janssen's negotiation skills. The inner feelings of the hero were sincere. He understood that he did not want to drag his friend into a dangerous battle between powerful constellations, but at the same time saw that his steadfast and unyielding had a difficult character and is unlikely to retreat. Old man Huang, Yongsung's friend and mentor, realizes that he will have to submit to the younger man, and it hurts his pride. But as a man used to harsh conditions, he accepts the situation as it is. After all, he has no choice. Having become a servant of the constellation, Huang is now bound to the invincible training avatar. His soul is bound to this constellation, and any disobedience could lead to serious consequences. While in the cafe with Yongxion and Odaigon, old man Huang tensely ponders his decision. The thought of making a pact with the constellation seems almost unthinkable. He never imagined that he would one day agree to such a deal. Janssen explains that the first step of their plan is to hide his true identity. It is important to him that no one finds out that he himself is a constellation. This information could cause too many problems. Huang listens to young Sun and is surprised to note that the constellation also has to hide its power. He's still a little confused. While Yeonsun hides his true identity as a constellation, he plans to gradually increase the number of servants. Their support will be needed when he has to face stronger constellations. However, Huang doubts whether he can handle the great demon alone. Yeonsun is concerned that the sport makes extensive use of underside magic, a special power usually used by constellations. He finds it strange that the participants in hunting competitions also make extensive use of this magic. The constellations seem to have intentionally made hunting competitions like SSL and UHC so popular to make it easier to choose servants based on their combat abilities. On the other hand, though, if the servants fight like the hunter contestants on Earth, it could give Huan a significant advantage. After all, he is already experienced in such battles and is a champion among hunters. Also, the number of servants will be an important factor for success. Old Man Huang must become so strong and significant that he will cause the other servants to envy and desire his strength. The strongest hunters always attract attention. As soon as the A-class gates open, governments start begging for their help, and this only strengthens the people's faith in their power. Old Man Huang boasts that he controls not just one clan, but an entire network of groups, generating profits beyond the ordinary world. Yeonsun wonders why he should join the clan when he can manage on his own. However, Huang reminds him that Yeonsun needs to hide his true identity as a constellation and act more cautiously. He suggests sending Yeonsun to the clan where the best candidates are gathered and looking around for potential servants who can prove their worth. Once you become an A-rank adventurer, you are immediately ranked as a strategic weapon under government control. Only those who achieve the highest results can receive the prestigious S rank. After all, less than 10 people in the entire world have been honored with this title. So, to get from words to action, they registered for the qualifier at UHC. Huang explains that it's not enough to just qualify for the league. You have to win to become a professional. He emphasizes how many people want to get in, hinting at the high level of competition. Since the qualifying round is only a week away, Yeonsun has time to get used to the new technology. He is surprised to learn about the smartphone and its capabilities, and begins to realize how useful it is. And Huang also orders his staff to bring in equipment for evaluation, as he needs to retest some. After that, he ponders that success will also require a reliable manager who can organize the process. Huang remembers his daughter with a difficult character, Ayn Lawrence, and instructs him to bring her in, though he's not entirely sure she'll show sympathy for Yeonsun. Yeonsun realizes he needs to win a tournament to get into the professional league, and wonders what else he needs to know. It is explained to Yeonsun that the qualifying round is mainly for C-ranked participants, although D and E-ranked hunters can also participate, so he has nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Odaigan, the king of goblins, is enthusiastically mastering the smartphone, fully immersed in the colorful game. He leads the character around the screen, deftly collecting coins and overcoming obstacles, as if forgetting about everything in the world. Jensen, watching him, wonders if phone games can really be so addictive that you can spend all day playing them. Before the competition, one of the competitors checks the equipment, suspecting that the past evaluator may have cheated him, because the measuring device literally crumbled into powder from the force of the object being tested. The specialist, having doubts, assumes that the young man has merely used a defective sample, but assures him that he is now perfectly sincere, and any suspicions have no basis. After a successful test, the specialist realized that he was dealing with a martial arts user, making the measurement process much more difficult. There was a belief that such people had a huge mana reserve, but it was extremely difficult to confirm this with the device. To make it clear, the interlocutor offered his partner to attend the fight in person to clearly assess the young man's capabilities. If the wearer of the device does have excess mana, you can suggest that they try to learn magic. A character enters the scene with an aggressive attitude, clearly ready for a confrontation. He sees the opponent with the call sign, returned from the abyss, and is determined to destroy him. Yeonsun enters a space called the world's other world, and is warned. He needs to limit his power, or risk destroying this reality. Yeonsun is faced with a colossal limitation that makes his real power multiply. Spectators watching the broadcast of the match discuss Yeonsun in the chat room. Some viewers believe that Yeonsun is just warming up for now, waiting for the moment for a powerful move, while others doubt that his abilities are so impressive if he hasn't shown them so far. Before the battle begins, Yeonsun's opponent strategizes. He plans to increase the distance and use second-round magic to steam through the air. Then, using his hidden skill, stalking arrows, he is going to release enhanced magic projectiles, hoping to take the enemy by surprise. As soon as the referee gives the signal, the fight begins. His opponent rushes forward momentarily, confident in his advantage, but Yeonsun quickly intercepts his attack. A crushing blow, and the winner is declared Hunter Choi Young-sun. Yeonsun is confused how quickly it was over. After seeing with his own eyes, the evaluator is ecstatic to declare that Youngsun is a true diamond who will no doubt become a driving force for their team. He is willing to go to any lengths to recruit him, recognizing that to meet such a treasure among the fighters is a rare stroke of luck. An agent of the Imbitus clan approaches Hunter Choi Young-sun, noting that the current hunters are not even close to the level of the former hunters, and that they are not hunters in a real fight. With a slight chuckle, Yeonsun replies that he used to think the same way, but has now changed his mind. According to him, it doesn't matter where you train, as long as the end result is the same. Then he bluntly adds that he has already guessed the purpose of their conversation. He is to be recruited into the clan. Then an agent from the Imbitus clan enthusiastically begins to tout the benefits: participation in raids, strong clan support, and personal training from top-level mages. In response, Yeonsun notes that he is used to relying on his fists, so such training is not necessary. The agent emphatically emphasizes that despite his obvious potential, Yeonsun is still a C-rank hunter, and advancing through the ranks is far from an easy task. However, Youngsun, without hesitation, gives an unequivocal refusal. The assistant announces that it's time for Hunter Choi Young-sun to get ready for his next fight. The two hands are firmly clasped in a handshake before the battle begins, symbolizing the mutual respect and determination of each. Now, Yeonsun decides to put 90% of his internal energy into speed and limit his martial arts power to avoid overload. As a result, he is able to create a new level martial arts technique that reaches rank B+. Yeonsun decides to assess the level of his opponent and notices that he is closer to rank C and specializes in close combat. His interest in the battle grows, but he is a bit surprised by his opponent's choice of weapon, a bow, which doesn't seem designed for close quarters combat. After a powerful punch, Yeonsun's opponent falls down, causing a storm of surprise from the audience. One observer dumbfoundedly suggests that Yeonsun is a monster who has returned from the abyss. The audience discusses that although these are only C-rank qualifying fights, such power is impressive, as it's not often that you see all fights end so instantly. One spectator notes that while Yeonsun is not bad, his strength is unlikely to help him defeat all of his opponents. He mentions another competitor, Hunter Eugene Eli, a newcomer to the Strickland clan. Eli specializes in one-on-one combat, does not participate in raids, and fights exclusively with humans. The secretary informs the director that the results of the qualifying round have come in, and notes that Hunter Choi Young-sun has won. Immediately deciding to seize the opportunity, Old Man Hwang, Yongsung's avatar, offers to summon an evaluator to assign the new fighter a higher rank, and is willing to take full responsibility for the possible consequences. The evaluator soon completes the measurement, assigning a B rank to Yeonsun. Yeonsun realizes that some constellations have begun to take notice of him, so he decides to advance his career more cautiously. At this time, his friend reminds him of the Icaros clan, and notes that with only a rank of C, Yeonsun could face arrogance within the clan, where all members are rank B or higher. Youngsun's friend mentions his intention to introduce him to his manager, but Youngsun reacts with slight irony. However, when he hears that it's about the interlocutor's daughter, he shows interest and decides to treat her to his dish. During dinner, Yeonsun notices the girl's strange behavior, and his companion, a former goblin king, whispers worriedly that perhaps the meat has gone bad, even though it was a select product from the constellation. Suddenly the girl revives and happily declares that Yeonsun should become a chef, suggesting that he open a restaurant with her as an investor, since Korean food is in vogue now. Afterward, the girl decides to get back to business and informs Yeonsun that she will now be his manager. She clarifies if he understands what her responsibilities are. Yeonsun suggests it's something about controlling his schedule and movements, but the girl explains that a top-level manager performs a broader range of tasks, including analyzing a hunter's abilities and strategies. The manager explains to Yeonsun that he may not fully understand the current world situation. She reports that the government has turned the city over to dragon industry, and adds that elsewhere guilds have been given entire countries to run. The girl notes that the Icaros clan is made up of very eccentric individuals, but their abilities justify the high pay. She warns that to join their ranks, Yeonsun will need serious training to match the level of the clan. She left her number, adding that she could Youngsun to call if she needed anything. As Old Man Hwang pointed out, the young man looked too normal for one who had returned from the abyss. She couldn't understand why he was so confident. So first of all, he needs to be trained to stand up to the mages, because he will soon have to face the monsters from the Rank B League. Before leaving, Youngsun reminded Odaigan that if he wanted to kill someone, he had to ask permission first. Youngsun realized that he would be surrounded by a lot of crazies, and he shouldn't attract attention. The young man closed his eyes, concentrating on the meditation that allowed him to connect to the constellation broadcast, the so-called star game, all in order to study in advance the countless constellations he would encounter in the future. The constellation, Invincible Training Master, decides to try his hand and seeks an opponent to fight, but he is only challenged to a duel by constellations of similar level. Lava and Magma's kitten hints that strong opponents are ignoring his request. It goes on to explain that a battle between constellations is a battle through chosen avatars, in which the loser pays a certain price. For the battle to be fair, both constellations must be on the same level. The name, Master of Training, is not known to anyone, and strong constellations have no reason to accept a challenge from someone who is of no value to them. He wondered why there was no news of the virtuous goddess of Libra anywhere, and concluded that perhaps something had happened. The next morning, Janssen was led to the Icaros clan's training base. There were individual halls and a dormitory for the clan members, where everyone could train according to their abilities. Janssen informed Odaigan that he was heading to the training room and asked what he was going to do. Odaigan showed his phone enthusiastically, saying he would get to work on the Golden Escape game. He seemed to like it a lot, but he brushed it off, noting that it was just a way to kill boredom. Janssen noticed that Odaigan had gone completely into the game. Deciding to leave it at that, he decided that he would start the training session by working on muscle strength. Walking into the training room, Yongsong noticed that someone was already there. The silhouette in the hall was lifting a barbell weighing 5 tons, which made Yongsun involuntarily freeze with astonishment. Such incredible strength could only be possessed by a close combat hunter, probably an elite tank. The stranger, noticing his interest, asked with a slight irony if he was new and if he had any business with her. Janssen, still amazed, began to say that he was impressed with her training, but she only laughed and muttered that flattery didn't work on her. Still, Elizabeth Gutierrez reached out and introduced herself and offered to try to connect. The girl, amazed by Yongsun's strength, recognized that this was the first time she was meeting someone stronger than herself, and wondered if he was a melee mage. Yongsun laughed and told her that he was just a martial arts user, which surprised her even more. What a surprise, to meet a martial arts user of rank B. Boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai. Elizabeth has studied all the top arts. It's not nice to have monsters breathing in your face. She was surprised he didn't recognize her, and with a slight chuckle reminded him that she was in the INS ranked league, and ranked 19th there. Walking into the hall, Elizabeth proudly introduced Janssen to the guys that it was their rookie martial arts user. A young man named Anthony approached Janssen, assuring him that their meeting was not accidental, and that they already knew each other. With undisguised pride, he began to list his accomplishments, from clearing the siege of Akarash dungeon and setting a record for night raids to his rapid promotion to B rank. He also announced that he was the ace of the clan, and reminded him that the rules were simple. For success to be guaranteed, the newcomer must trust him completely and obey him in everything. I wonder if he's crazy. Elizabeth, determined to put the recent tensions behind her, offered to give Janssen a friendly duel. They went to the ring and stood across from each other, preparing for their upcoming bout. Janssen, catching her keen interest in martial arts, decided to demonstrate an important principle. He cautioned her against getting too close to an experienced fighter, and, showing his skill, he demonstrated how lightning fast he could effectively react to the sudden approach of an opponent. No matter how swift the magic was, it was still inferior to the power of a martial arts user's strikes. Yongsun was amazed at the unexpected speed of her attack, a rare quality for a mage. He realized that a girl with such strength and skill could be his best avatar. Elizabeth, stunned by the way Janssen's blow broke through her magical defenses, was confused for a moment. As she recovered, she was still puzzled as to how he had managed to do that, since she had definitely managed to activate magic in time, counting on full protection. Yongsong explained that he was using a completely different power that didn't involve magical muscle enhancement. This technique, based on pure martial arts skill, allowed him to bypass magic barriers and strike his opponents directly. Elizabeth noted that this guy was really different from the others. Clenching her fists and gathering her courage, she decided to try again, one last time. Janssen felt genuine admiration. Such persistence was to his liking. After the fight, Elizabeth admitted that she hadn't felt so tired after sparring for a long time. Realizing the training wasn't enough for her, she felt an even brighter determination surging within her. Elizabeth vowed to defeat Janssen with her own strength, doing her best to become stronger. Janssen advised Elizabeth to learn martial arts rather than magic to eliminate her weaknesses. However, she replied that it was a matter of pride for her to not learn from a potential enemy. From that moment on, she decided to consider Yongshong as her opponent. Although they will still say hello when they meet, she is not going to accept any help from him. The kitten of magma and lava expressed his displeasure, hinting that Young Sun could have been more considerate of his opponent. Yongshong mentally countered with a slight irritation that he couldn't afford to lose a fight on purpose. Yeah, is finding suitable avatars really that difficult? The next day at the Ikaros training center, training began again in the same room. Janssen noticed Richard's presence with interest and wondered if he had joined Ikaros. Richard replied with a slight chuckle and joked back that his path had brought him here due to unexpected circumstances. At some point, a clan mentor named Ernest appeared in the hall. He welcomed the newcomers, expressing his hope that they would become worthy hunters. The trainer then asked a question about what a hunter's most important weapon is in fighting monsters. Janssen confidently replied that the most important weapon was the hunter himself, and he was quite right. Unshakable faith in himself has always been the main source of Janssen's strength. It was this faith that allowed him to become stronger and endure the long years in the abyss. The clan mentor also emphasized the importance of unity, calling it the single most powerful weapon. Even the strongest S-rank fighter would not dare to go down into the dungeon alone, because humans, by nature, cannot compare to monsters in strength. The coach announced that there would be a doubles practice today. Janssen was glad to have Odegon by his side, but no, his joy was premature. The coach assigned him to partner with a guy who had acted like a real psycho the day before. The trainer summoned the illusion of a wyvern, a powerful monster of rank above B, and ordered the team to act. A couple of fighters were panicking as they tried to quickly coordinate their actions. One insisted on putting up a shield against the breath attack, while the other, desperate, said it was too late and demanded immediate evasion. Janssen noticed that his partner had activated a third-level spell, Hashan's acceleration. Realizing that they were bound by magic, he realized that he would now be forced to follow him. Janssen was annoyed, for his partner's actions were too presumptuous. The trainer, watching Jensen's speed, marveled that martial arts could bring abilities to such a level, surpassing even magic in speed and evasion. He noted that Jensen was the most outstanding fighter he had ever seen. Meanwhile, Jensen and his partner began to argue. The partner resented Jensen for not following his actions, and Jensen, in turn, accused him of being slow. In front of them was an illusion of an ancient sand monster in the shape of a worm, a stone eater. This predator lives in level B dungeons, hiding in the ground and sensing the slightest vibrations. Whenever it detects movement, it immediately attacks, capturing and devouring its prey. The coach sharply reminded the team that if they could not respond to such a threat, they did not belong among hunters. He demanded that they stop complaining and focus on training. Janssen felt inspired and pleased by such an experience, for such trials are to his liking. The warm-up was completed. The trainer instructed the fighters to take a break and then continue the dungeon sweep according to the plan. Janssen was surprised that they were actually going to go to the dungeon, but the trainer explained that under current conditions, a dungeon could be simulated in the space of the primordial world. Just as Huang predicted, baseball and soccer have almost lost popularity, ceding team supremacy to hunting sports. The other sports exist only formally. One of the hunters approached Janssen to teach him martial arts techniques. Janssen noted that the willingness to share knowledge is rare in the hunting community. Also, although he could pass on his skills, success in this endeavor depends primarily on the persistence of the student. Still, during the training, the apprentice expressed his displeasure with Janssen's methods, irritably asking how long he would whip him. Ignoring the indignation, Janssen calmly continued his own, correcting his posture and insisting on the accuracy of the exercises. Janssen thought about the methods of the clan hunters who use mana to enhance the body by drawing magic from outside. He was surprised to learn that this energy did not pass directly through the body, but was manipulated from the outside. This seemed complicated to him, and he suggested a more understandable way, triggering the circulation of his own mana. The young man also asked his student to take his time, and promised to support his mana with his naygun if he couldn't keep control. The student was surprised to realize that the method actually worked, and he was able to achieve the result. Impressed, he noted that the sensation of the technique was completely different from that of a simple punch. A few days later, the team reconvened in the indoor practice facility. The instructor briefly explained the essence of the task. 6 participants should form a group to enter the dungeon. The main objective of the training mission was to quickly and safely eliminate all threats in the zone. The rules were simple, but required everyone's focus and teamwork. When discussing the possibilities of the clan, it was mentioned that only the first team participates in real battles. Only those who have shown outstanding skills in training are selected. The coach concluded the briefing by summarizing that the teams had already been formed and pointed to the holographic screen where the lists of each group's members were displayed. Those in attendance began scrutinizing their lineups, preparing for the upcoming practice. Janssen notices that their group does not cross paths with Odaigan again. This detail alarmed him, and he wondered if it was a coincidence or a conscious decision by the organizers. Meanwhile, Elizabeth could not hide her disappointment. She regretfully expressed her opinion that their team was doomed to failure due to a weak roster. One of the team members tried to support Elizabeth, noting that she had never been cut from the first team before, and expressed confidence that this time it would be okay. His words sounded reassuring, though they didn't completely dispel her doubts. Upon reflection, Elizabeth noted that one of their teammates, though he liked long-range combat better, was much more confident with close-range combat. Suddenly a new member joined the group, introducing himself as Vitekar. With a wide smile, he said he was looking for new friends and asked them to take care of him. However, his cordiality met with a cold reception. Elizabeth did not hesitate to tell him to get lost, and declared that she would not allow him to add himself to their team. Surprised by this reaction, Janssen inquired what was wrong with this guy. Elizabeth explained that Vitekar thought solely of money, and was used to dividing people according to the benefits they could bring. Vitekar, not embarrassed by the criticism, tried to justify himself. He called his actions the principle of give and take. In his opinion, if you get something, you have to pay an equal price. The guy was sure that reality had not yet reached the newcomer's consciousness after his long wanderings in the abyss. He claimed that everything would change soon, and he would realize what was happening. The group entered a dungeon called the Trial of the Crossroads. According to the rules, their task was to clear the location as quickly as possible, avoiding collisions with opponents. While discussing tactics, one of the hunters offered to scout ahead of the group. But reminding Elizabeth of her promise to obey elicited a curt response from her. The girl remarked that she would only follow instructions if they were reasonable, while emphasizing her superiority in close combat. Elizabeth then pointed out that there would be enough provisions and necessities for 2 weeks, and suggested that the supplies be divided among the party to continue the journey. The guy wouldn't even listen to her and, ignoring any remarks, rushed forward. Elizabeth gritted her teeth. She wanted to punch the cocky lunatic, but she sighed and concentrated on continuing on her way. Suddenly, a stone chameleon jumped out of the shadows, drawing attention to itself as much as possible. That guy was Janssen. When the team froze in indecision, he took the initiative, using his Hashan's acceleration technique to neutralize the threat. Lightning fast, he struck the stone chameleon with his weapon, the legendary moon sword, which was famous for its range. With an upgraded subspace necklace attached to his belt, Janssen was prepared for any situation, using his resources efficiently. One of the partners expressed his displeasure that Janssen had interfered, claiming that he was the one who had first discovered the monster and had the right to eliminate it. However, Janssen coolly reminded that staying strong for more serious opponents is a priority, especially for experienced fighters. And perfect logic! The bodies of the defeated stone chameleons were lying on the ground haphazardly. Janssen, standing at the front of the group, confidently lowered his sword, which was emitting a faint glow. In the operations room, the abilities of Anthony Schneider, one of the members of the first team, were being discussed intensely. Despite his outstanding skills, his lack of team spirit raised doubts about the advisability of his participation. The manager decided to continue to monitor Anthony Schneider for a little while longer, and then make a final decision. However, their discussion was interrupted by an urgent signal requesting attention to the A12 screen. When asked about what had happened, the operator anxiously recommended to look at it personally. Meanwhile, the team, putting aside doubts, rushed forward with a single impulse, united by a common goal and ready for any challenge. Janssen quickly took the initiative, clearly assigning roles. Taking the fight to the 3 monsters, he instructed Gutierrez to cover their flank, and entrusted Anthony with the key attack. Ah, a fine example of teamwork, isn't it? Who'd have thought that with a crew like this, the raid would go off without a hitch? A stone gargoyle, a demonic-looking chameleon monster, suddenly tried to surround them, taking them by surprise. He had immense strength, stamina, and the ability to blend in with the surrounding rocks, making him still a truly dangerous opponent. However, there was nothing to worry about. The monster, suddenly showing cowardice, had already retreated, not daring to continue its attack. Some of the observers expressed alarm at the high speed of the team's progress through the dungeon, believing it to be dangerous. The coach assured that the participants acted deliberately, and even in the event of defeat, they would be able to learn a valuable lesson. However, he agreed that the first team was in extremely difficult and unfavorable conditions. Trial of the Crossroads is one of the classified dungeons that China only attracted top hunters to storm 17 years ago. Despite the fact that the monsters of the dungeon did not exceed B rank, its complex structure with a lot of tricks attracts A rank. Watching Youngsun, the trainer concluded that the young man probably knew what he was dealing with, and had probably encountered gargoyles before. His confident response indicated experience in such situations. Soon, Elizabeth does come to the conclusion that everything going on is nothing but a trap. The level of difficulty makes one think that they were deliberately sent on a deadly mission. Anthony activated the magical barrier that could capture the life energy of approaching creatures, proudly noting his usefulness. Elizabeth, noticing his smugness, reminded him that using magic once was no reason to brag. The guys decided to set up the tent, and after finishing their work, one of the team members suggested taking a break and having a snack of sandwiches to recover before the next stage. Realizing that sandwiches weren't enough, Janssen suggested making extra portions of food from the carcasses of slain chameleons. But this drew a skeptical reaction from the team since the monsters were made of stone. With unperturbed confidence, Yongsong declared that chameleons were quite fit to eat. Picking up the magic device, he promised to handle the cooking himself, as if turning cooking into another adventure. Meanwhile, the other teams one by one went out of the game. The group looked interestedly at the dish being prepared, discussing its possible recipe. Someone suggested that it could be risotto or paella, noting that rice is often used in Asian cuisine. The first person who tasted the dish was surprised to recognize that it was unexpectedly delicious. His delight testified to the success of the experiment. The meal eaten not only restored his strength, but also replenished his mana completely, causing the team to marvel. The cameraman wondered if the team had set up a real dungeon cafeteria, expressing concerns about possible poison. The coach calmly noted their resourcefulness and composure. After a hearty meal, the team decided to rest, leaving 2 members on guard duty. After a while, the sentries noticed movement and woke up the others. It turned out that the stone gargoyles had launched an attack, summoning their boss into the dungeon. Stone Predator. Taking the form of a huge worm, this monster is an order of magnitude more powerful and is able to smash through earth and rock. His main food is rocks, but he can tear hunters to pieces. Yeah, that practice was a shame. Moonwalking is a technique that allows the user to move at incredible speeds, leaving behind energy trails. The stone gargoyles attack furiously, but the hero's sudden speed confuses them. One of the hunters activates the speed ice bomb ability, creating deadly ice shards. The stone predator opens its jaws menacingly, but the hero delivers a powerful blow from above, dismembering the enemy with his sword. The team was shocked by what they saw, realizing that the abilities displayed were of a rank level beyond the reach of most of them.
How the hell did the chairman bring in a hunter like that?
After a while, one of the hunters found Janssen in the training room. Janssen assumed the man intended to join the class, but the young man suggested a change of scenery and a walk around the city to distract himself after returning from the abyss. However, Janssen, remaining indifferent to the idea, refused and continued to focus on training. But after a couple of persistent entreaties, he gave in, and soon they were in the car. It was a city of hunters, where literally everything was related to their activities. The companion reminded Janssen of their membership in the Icaros clan, which guaranteed them honorable treatment and privileges anywhere in the city. However, Janssen was certain that the title of hunter alone did not guarantee special status. And so, they arrived in Chinatown, a neighborhood known for its black market. I wonder how the local government allows such a thing in its territory. One of the main advantages of the local market is the easy access to rare but questionable artifacts that can be purchased without too many questions. The hunters returned with a huge amount of food, much to their comrades' surprise. Janssen commented that they would suffer the same fate as the dish they had tasted earlier, recalling the experience of cooking monster meat. Leaving their purchases in the car, the hunters headed for the auction, located in the underground floor of one of the elite buildings. A representative met them at the entrance, welcoming one of the participants as a member of the Icaros clan and offered to escort them. While waiting for the auction to start, the guys decided to pass the time in the gaming area. One of them confidently declared that he was a master of roulette and had never lost. The guards are off to the side discussing one of the participants, contemplating whether to approach and inquire about his combat skills. However, one of them quickly quashed the idea, reminding them of the importance of confidentiality and suggesting that they focus on getting the auction started. The auction began, and the attention of the participants was drawn to the lots presented. One of the first lots, a spear of Xvitron, sold for $50,000. Despite the artifact's impressive appearance, Yongshong immediately noticed its uselessness and was surprised at such a high price. The auction introduced the Thunderflame dagger, featuring durability, high attack power, and access to the subspace vault and subspace summoning skills. The artifact interested Yeonsen, as the skills could be useful. However, he wasn't sure if he had enough money to buy it, even with the card given to him by Gyeongrin. At the auction, the next lot aroused low interest of participants. No one offered more than $7,000, as the item was not valuable enough for the gathered public. Despite the doubts of his comrades who thought the purchase was a waste, Yeonsen made the decision to purchase the artifact. He felt that having such an item in stock could be useful in the future, even if its use was not obvious at the moment. After the auction was over, Yeonsen was suddenly surrounded by people dressed in black cloaks. The stranger reminded him threateningly that he would not get away with it for insulting a warrior known for his bloodthirstiness and madness. The atmosphere got heated. The auction guards noticed what was going on and ordered them not to move in order to take control of the situation. Suddenly, an intimidating figure materialized in front of Yeonsong, emitting an aura of rage and madness. It was the warrior himself, the embodiment of power and chaos. His mocking gaze was accompanied by a challenge to try to survive, if possible. In an attempt to divert attention, Yeonsong declared himself the avatar of the invincible god of training and challenged the warrior to a fight. However, his statement had little effect. The warrior ignored the challenge, as he had never heard of such a deity. The guards were rapidly approaching, intent on getting the troublemakers outside the building. Yeonsen decided to act swiftly. He activated his Milky Finger ability, intending to strike his opponent with precision. However, the monster was fast and intercepted the attack, showing strength. Gripping Yeonsen's arm, the enemy declared that he would take his blood, which only fueled the tension of the bout. At that moment, Yeonsen's new ability, the Great Law of Absorption, activated, giving him a chance to turn the tide. Yeonsen, using the Great Law of Absorption, managed to direct the enemy's power against himself, causing significant damage. Realizing that the situation was getting out of control, the warrior stopped watching the battle and decided to act personally. Concentrating all the power of the avatars into one body, the enemy descended to control the assassin himself. Warrior controls the avatar, having been absorbed into his body, which allowed him to exercise full power and control. This way of interacting seemed extremely cruel to Yeonsen, as the avatar would completely lose its will, becoming an instrument of destruction. After a powerful attack that caused significant damage to the avatar, the warrior recognized Yeonshong's abilities. As a sign of respect and recognition, he officially accepted the challenge to the constellation battle. The kitten of magma and lava confidently stated that everything was going according to plan, watching on in a relaxed manner. His companion, the goddess of desire, expressed doubts, believing that it would be worth reaching a higher-level constellation status before engaging in such a meaningful battle. However, Kitten did not lose optimism and assured that the current actions are fully in line with what was intended. One of the auction representatives bowed his head and apologized for the errors in organization, admitting that proper checks had not been done and outsiders had managed to get in. Yeonsen, trying to end the situation without too much trouble, assured that everything was fine and that they would keep what had happened private. The other guard at the auction, embarrassed at the excuse, asked Yeonsen for a moment and motioned an elderly man in traditional clothing over to him. The one asked if the young man had ever heard of a clan called Huashan School. Hearing the name Huashan School, Yeonsong remembered that it was one of the Chinese clans that had been famous until about 30 years ago. The older man's face seemed painfully familiar to him. Suddenly, he realized that it was indeed Master Li standing in front of him. Not missing the opportunity, Yeonsen respectfully asked the master for his autograph, much to the surprise of those present. Master Li, smiling modestly, said that he didn't think he was worthy of signing autographs. However, seeing Yeongshong's genuine admiration, he decided to fulfill his request. Master Li suddenly approached Yeongshong with a request. He and his students would like to learn a martial art from him. This request clearly took Yeongshong by surprise. The accompanying guards, watching the conversation, suddenly suggested that Yeongshong might be an avatar of the constellation Invincible God of Training. They expressed a desire to know what it takes to achieve this level of skill, hinting at possible supernatural reasons for his abilities. The devotion of those around him to Yeonsong increased dramatically, greatly enhancing his strength. One of the clan representatives clarified that their request was not limited to mere training. In return, they were ready to offer him absolute loyalty, seeing him not only as a mentor but also as a leader. Upon his return, Yeonson was met by a female employee who informed him that the chairman was waiting for him. Walking to his friend's office, Yeonsong decided to clarify the information about the clan called Hwashan School. Old Man Hwang explained that the Hwashan School clan had been defeated during the first wave of the Great Invasion, when the entire territory of China was in chaos. Later, Master Li, one of the prominent members of this clan, lost his rank and was defeated during the second wave. The old man also suggested that the rank forgery might have been organized by the authorities, as Li himself was unlikely to voluntarily go for it. Hearing this, Yeongshung noted with a slight chuckle that it was worth keeping a closer eye on the situation. He said that he had just recently spoken to Master Li and seen him in person, and he lived nearby. Sensing the apparent rebuke in Yeongsun's words, Old Man Hwang decided to remind him of his importance. He pointed to a stack of documents, saying he received daily reports on major political issues, the situation of major clans, and urban problems. Then, with a dose of bravado, he added that not so long ago he had lunch with the American president and even visited a sauna with him. At the end of the conversation, Old Man Hwang waved his hand and pointed his finger at Yeongsun and said that he was free to take advantage of the situation as he saw fit, or, if he felt it was unnecessary, simply refuse. The next day, the Star Games began. The constellation God of Training accepted a bid from Warrior for a battle between their avatars. Yeonsun acted as the representative of the God of Training, which caused a wave of discussion among the observing constellations. The tense atmosphere only fueled the interest of spectators in the upcoming battle. Warrior has offered Bloody Fortress as a bet in the upcoming bout. The constellation Goddess of Nightmares marveled at the high value of this territory. The God of Training has put in his bid, offering incredibly valuable artifacts. The divine space art, the one who turns back time, and the voice from the depths of the sea. So the two constellations came to an agreement, drawing up a formal treaty. The warrior introduced his avatar. It turned out to be an intimidating monster named Akapata. Yeonsun suggested that it was a typical berserker with high magical defense and a powerful regeneration ability, making it especially dangerous in close combat. The warrior mistakenly believed that the avatar exhibited by the training god, although showing good combat skills, was unlikely to surpass level 300. With confidence in his victory, he added that Akapata will defeat his opponent without much trouble. The terms of the contract were harsh. If the training god was defeated, he would become a servant of the warrior, plunged into madness and bloodlust. Without wasting any time, Yeongsun activated his weapon, unleashing a series of swift attacks. His opponent, Akarata, showed incredible strength, blocking blows and counterattacking with incredible speed. However, thanks to the divine space art skill, Yeongsung was able to repel the powerful magic attack that was directed against him. This maneuver caused his opponent to stall for a moment, giving Yeonsun a slight edge in a tight battle. Constellations complemented this scene. By using the Scarlet Resurrection ability, Akarata instantly regained his health, and thanks to this effect, he was affected by the Madness Curse. Yeonsun noticed that the wounds inflicted on the enemy only made him stronger, and it was better to reconsider his battle tactics. Using the Milky Finger technique, he unleashed a powerful attack accompanied by a dazzling flash of light. Activating the Great Law of Absorption skill, Yeongsun began to absorb Akarata's mana. At this time, the constellation, a storyteller who loves rumors and explanations, noted that such a move seemed overly risky. However, in this way, Yeongsun acquired the skill Blood Mineralization. When used, it activates mineralization during the process of blood boiling, which leads to loss of reason, but dramatically increases the skill of combat. Akarata, presenting himself as a great warrior soldier, flatly refused to admit defeat. Yeonsun, watching him, pondered that the fight would only end when the enemy was completely eliminated. However, the intervention of the demon, who agreed with Yeonsun's arguments, ended the confrontation. Blood Fortress, staked out by the warrior, came under Yeonsun's control. Having successfully completed his first battle among the constellations, Yeonsun has officially entered the Earth constellation rankings. Yeonsun is currently ranked 127th in the rankings. A notice suddenly appeared. The virtuous goddess of Libra has sent an invitation to visit her domain. Yeonsun initiated the negotiations in the alliance by stating the topic, how to deal with the goddess. From the beginning, he asked the participants to avoid idle chatter and focus on the point. The goddess of desire, supporting this idea of union, reminded participants of the importance of caution, as the absence of evil intentions on the part of the entrant does not guarantee the absence of a potential threat. If cooperation with the goddess will lead to losses, it is better to abandon the idea of an alliance. There is a high probability that the goddess will be able to unravel Choi Young-sin's true identity. Despite this, he decides to try to sway her to his side, if only for the sake of the future. Choi Young-sin arrives at the goddess's domain, but his first impression makes him doubt the right place. As he enters the empty hall, he notices the absence of avatars and followers. The kitten anxiously suggests that it might be a trap. Choi Young-sin suggests not jumping to conclusions, because the absence of subordinates doesn't necessarily indicate a difficult situation. They may be busy with other things at the moment. Choi Young-sin found himself face to face with the goddess. Despite his confusion, he tried to take control of the situation. The goddess expressed regret for not directing him to the training tower right away, but he assured her that it was fine, and it was in the past. The Libra goddess inquired if the invincible god of training was aware of the visit, mistakenly believing that his avatar was before her. Choi Young-sun evasively remarked that his master had graciously allowed the meeting. He then honestly added that his arrival was for another purpose, to offer cooperation on behalf of his host. The goddess wondered what exactly her interlocutor meant, but he only evasively assured her that everything would become clear in time. For a moment she thought about her past, recognizing that she had made many mistakes. In the old days, the goddess held the position of one of the most powerful constellations at the top of the hierarchy. In the past, even powerful constellations have bowed their heads to the goddess, seeking to know their future, and have brought her untold riches. Each such sacrifice greatly increased her influence. However, things have changed over time. It now barely holds the status of a lower-level constellation. The reason for this was her numerous defeats in constellation battles, a brutal arena where even the strongest lose their status after a few setbacks. Sending her strongest angel on a quest deprived her of important support, which was the reason for her constant defeats. On the subject of cooperation, the goddess first expresses doubt, asking if this constellation has any flaws she might not like, such as a difficult character or strange habits. In response, our hero emphasizes that his master is the perfect constellation, known for his nobility, concern for avatars, and unrivaled skill in combat. The Libra goddess replies that she doesn't mind, but doubts that she will be able to live up to expectations. She worries that their cooperation may end in disappointment, especially given the weakening of her powers of foresight. In response, the hero confidently states that it doesn't matter, as his master values her wisdom and wants her to help strategize for the constellation battle. In that case, the goddess is very grateful and agrees to accept the offer. Talking to the goddess of scales, Janssen found out that only Earth constellations are included in the ranking. The first place is still empty, but the conditions for occupying it are not entirely clear even to the other constellations. We can assume that this requires having incredible power of influence. The second place is probably occupied by the constellation called Master of Laziness and Silence. This is a powerful evil constellation that has subjugated the northern lands of China. The goddess, being associated with the constellation God of Training, offered the hero something important. Her decision was motivated by a sincere desire to make amends for past actions. When her hand touched his shoulder, the space around her filled with a bright glow, as if the universe itself was reacting to the event. As a result, the hero gained an ability or skill that allows him to see into the future. Meanwhile, the goddess of nightmares reminded the hero with equanimity that despite the counselor he had found for success, he needed to focus on increasing his followers and building faith in him, which was the basis for his power. At the same time, she made it clear that, being at a considerable distance from the events, she would not always be able to help him. After a while, our protagonist returned to his friend's spacious office. When he saw Gyeongyong sitting at the massive desk, he got right down to business. The young man reminded them that their task now was to test and understand the nature of their new gift, to build up their strength and prepare themselves properly for the upcoming battle. Although he assured that the battle would not begin anytime soon, his tone betrayed an awareness of how important these steps would prove to be. Since Yunsen has no urgent business to attend to anytime soon, Yongryong asks him to lend his strength for one important task. Mrs. Lawrence decisively flies into the office and intervenes in their conversation, accusing one of the people present of ignoring her calls. The reason for the misunderstanding turns out to be trivial. Jensen is not used to using a smartphone and therefore forgot to charge it. The girl clarifies the situation. Her call was regarding the fight schedule, as Jensen has passed the qualifying trials and is now on the main roster. Gyeongryong tries again to take the opportunity to ask Yoonsun for help, but Lawrence is quick to quash it, reminding him that the hunter is now busy with his career. Toward the end, the situation ends on a comical note, when it turns out that the advice to call in case of emergency is useless. Jensen is simply not used to using the phone. Jensen and Mrs. Lawrence get into the car and head toward the pier. Upon arrival, his attention was immediately drawn to the huge luxury yacht shining in the light of the night sky. It appeared to be intended solely for the purpose of dining. Watching this, Jensen was amazed at how much Gyeongryong's life had changed, now successful and rich. The young man asked if Mrs. Lawrence often dined in such luxurious surroundings, to which she replied that she chose this place when something important needed to be discussed in silence and privacy. Jensen tries a dish created using the Italian cuisine skill, and unexpectedly has a new recipe added to his abyss kitchen. Inspired, he contemplates trying more new dishes to create his own unique recipes. Ms. Lawrence turns the conversation back to work, reminding them that the schedule of fights is already set. She notes that it is rare for newcomers to participate in fights, especially for those hunters who have not yet made a name for themselves. However, there are rumors among athletes and fans about his fake rank. It is claimed that he possesses B-rank level abilities but is deliberately hiding under the guise of C+. Jensen watches a video of his next opponent, who turns out to be an avatar of an elf deity, and wonders how common elves are on Earth. Mrs. Lawrence explains that since the opening of the passageways, more elves have been encountered, though still not as often. Lawrence jokingly offers to brutally punish an impertinent rival, and this causes Jensen to admire her bright and determined character. The girl reports that the fight could take place within the next 2 weeks, and during that time she will gather more information about her opponent. Also, Lawrence gives Jensen instructions before his public appearance. She advises answering questions with slight provocation, exchanging intense glances with your opponent, and making sure to keep the camera's attention to make the right impression. Choi Young-sun must win by all means, by any means necessary. The team reports that they have contacted Sifola and he is on his way to help. When Jason is mentioned, Mrs. Lawrence abruptly rejects the idea, deeming him an unsuitable candidate, and demands to find someone faster and more nimble. On reflection, she offers to edit the tape of the practice match to improve Jensen's image, but Jensen himself politely declines, insisting on honesty and avoiding unnecessary manipulation. Jensen thanks for the support, noting that he is happy to work with an understanding manager. He reports that he plans to train alone before the match and asks to be contacted if the need arises. Mrs. Lawrence ponders that she should have detained him to discuss the details and persuade him to listen to her opinion. She recognizes, however, that such methods will not work with such a man. Jensen heads to the Icaros gym to prepare for his upcoming fight. In the audience, Jensen is confronted by a teammate who praises him for his bold interview, noting that such provocation is in keeping with the level of a serious opponent. He offers to do a joint training fight, but Jensen calmly declines the offer, explaining that he prefers to prepare alone before the match. Our hero then immerses himself in intense training, including working with his imagination to visualize possible combat scenarios. Jensen utilizes his unique skill by successfully transferring the image created in his imagination to others. Elizabeth is shocked by what is happening and is surprised to notice that she too can see the vision. The day of the competition had arrived. A lively crowd gathered around the Hunters Stadium, the main arena where the key events would unfold. When Jensen enters the arena, the spectators meet him with fury, accusing him of cheating, demanding he leave the league and shouting threats, openly expressing their contempt. Before entering the arena, Mrs. Lawrence reminds Jensen of the importance of breakfast, even though he worries that the excitement may not digest the food. She clarifies that in the warped world, the body still retains its original shape. Jensen steps into the arena. His gaze is determined, for tonight's match is not just a battle, but an opportunity for him to revitalize his martial arts and prove his true strength. Maximilian, Jensen's B-rated opponent, is a top 10 rated fighter. His popularity impresses viewers and opponents alike, making additional introductions unnecessary. Jensen enters an arena transformed into virtual ruins and marvels at the realism of the environment created for combat. Every detail is as real as the real thing. Meanwhile, Maximilian, relying on his legendary bow with incredible speed and accuracy, immediately takes the initiative, increasing the distance between them. His strategy is obvious: keep his opponent at a distance while maintaining control of the situation. However, Jensen acts differently. Instead of rushing into the attack, he deliberately takes a pause, carefully watching every move of his opponent. This is the tactic of an experienced fighter who prefers to analyze his opponent's actions, study his style, and patiently wait for the perfect moment to strike back. As Maximilian's arrows rush towards the target, Jensen activates his unique skill, Divine Space Art. A powerful barrier surrounds him, instantly reflecting all fired arrows. An attack that seemed flawless turns against Maximilian himself. Realizing that he is losing control, the elf strikes a decisive blow, confident in the success of his trap. But suddenly his mana is drained by Jensen's unexpected counterattack. Stunned, Maximilian realizes that his advantage is shattered, and his strength is leaving him. Jensen, towering over his exhausted opponent, keeps his composure. He takes his time, fully in control of the fight. With his restraint and strategic precision, Jensen shows that true strength is not only power, but also the ability to think ahead. Round 2 begins with a lightning-fast acceleration from Maximilian. His speed stuns onlookers, but suddenly Jensen shows incredible movement technique, competing with his opponent on equal footing. The commentators are amazed. This is the first time they have seen such speed. Tensions rise as the fighters turn the arena into a field of blitz attacks. And now the fight reaches its climax. Jensen takes advantage of Maximilian's vulnerability to land the finishing blow. His technique is so fast-paced and precise that the audience doesn't have time to realize what has happened. Maximilian goes down and the judges score a knockout. It's a moment that turned the rookie's perception of him upside down. He didn't just stand up to a top fighter, but did it with astonishing skill. A notice appeared. Crowds of people are chanting your name. The power of your essence has increased. But a flash of energy overwhelmed Jensen, and he saw a grim picture. Las Vegas was on fire, and monsters burst out of the ruined dungeons. Destruction and chaos filled the streets like a warning of impending disaster. In Kyungran's office, a name that echoed from the past was suddenly called out. Lee Chang-shik. The two were once close friends, but that all changed after a quarrel that occurred after Gyeongren moved to America. And then, suddenly reminded of himself, Lee Chang-shik called. His voice sounded demanding, insisting on an explanation about Yongsun's return. Gyeongren coldly cut him off. If it was important, then let Chang-shik contact Yongsun himself. After dropping the call, Kyungran leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily, apologizing. How hard could it be? He mumbled, amazed at how old grudges could turn into problems that lasted for years. When the monks saw Yongsun, they immediately knelt down, shocked by his presence. His aura of power and confidence left no doubt that the bearer of the divine gift was standing before them. He announced that he was ready to train those who would follow the god of training, awakening in them a forgotten desire for mastery. The monks, burning with the desire to revive their art, recognized him as their mentor, obeying him without hesitation. The growing number of followers strengthened the power of the constellation, giving its essence a new level of power. The next day, Yongsun traveled to the Bloody Fortress, a sinister place that was saturated with madness and blood. As he assessed the situation, he glimpsed the errand entrusted to Odaigun, hoping he could handle it. But the chaos before his eyes quickly dashed those hopes. His attempts to teach the locals magic were clearly failing, so Yongsung decided to take matters into his own hands. After gathering the orcs, Yongsung noticed their fondness for axes and decided to train them in martial arts. The orcs were confused by the instructions, asking strange questions about techniques and props. Realizing that explanations were ineffective, he moved on to practical training, demanding complete focus from his charges. Not allowing them to relax, Yongsun made the warriors practice every movement to the point of automaticity, molding them into a disciplined force. The orc territory had lost its former tranquility, plunged into strict discipline and continuous training under the constellation. Yongsun decided to turn these lands into a training ground that would be the foundation for preparing orcs for new heights of skill. Yongsun realized that building a base would require considerable time and effort. To speed up the process, he decided to utilize Stargame, a system that unlocks access to unique deals and assignments. Yongsun was looking for a constellation that traded in quests, and his attention was caught by the snake of drinking and dancing. However, the owner of the Lamia form was clearly not in a sober state. Yongsun realized that his supply of soul stones was far less than necessary. The feeling of a catastrophic lack of resources made it clear that it was time to look for new ways to replenish them. The snake of drinking and dancing constellation suggested waiting for Yongsun to collect the right amount of points. As a token of her generosity, she gave him the magnificent 8 Sins rice vodka, capable of healing any mental wounds. Either way, he really enjoyed the reservoir of life-giving alcohol. Suddenly, the wandering merchant Constellation appeared and offered its services. Yongsung reported that he needs a building but is woefully short of soul stones. The merchant assured that he could get everything he needed for any constellation, regardless of their rank. He swore on his name and reputation, saying the deals were completely honest. In addition, as a bonus for the first purchase, he offered a 200p discount on the purchase of 2 boxes. Having completed the transaction, Yongsung decided to take a chance and opened the building box. A stream of energy burst out from it and materialized an ancient dilapidated temple, the Warrior Sanctuary. This building had unique properties. All of its inhabitants received the skill Ancient Warrior Strength. However, due to dilapidation, the temple was designed to last only 30 days, after which it was to collapse. When Yongsung opened the second box, he received the Shining Elf Temple, allowing him to learn the powerful skill Shining Elf Bow. He immediately remembered that this magic was a gift from the Elf of Honorable Light to his avatar. After a short thought, Yongsung decided to set up a temple to take advantage of its capabilities. When Yongsung returned to the office, he was greeted by Kyeryong, happily calling him Korea's Fist Star and demanding his autograph. Later, Kyeryong moves on to discuss his successes, reminding him that there are strong contenders in the top 10 contestants, most of whom are avatars. Yongsung replies confidently that he can handle it, since he is a constellation himself. Hwang Kyungryong informs Yongsung that Changshik called. He sarcastically asks why Yongsung is so happy to hear from him, and immediately reminds him that it's not Changshik who's supporting him, but he himself, acting as his avatar and providing financial assistance. The old man explains that he's not petty, but he considers Changshik an asshole, causing him to advise against dealing with him. Soon, however, Yongsung moves on to a more serious discussion. He tells Gyeongryong about the important information, the gift from the goddess he recently received, and shares the details of his vision. During the discussion, Youngsung also mentions the situation in Las Vegas, which has been affected by fire and rock drake infestation. Offering to deal with the problem personally, Youngsung expresses his willingness to act provided he receives support. However, Gyeongryong notes that Las Vegas is outside his jurisdiction and cautions, intervening can only make matters worse by drawing unwanted attention. The only possible solution is to go to the problematic region, try to explain the circumstances and convince the hunters that they are right. Yongsung, for his part, ironically reminds his friend of his connections, including his acquaintance with the president. However, Gyeongryong explains that influence won't help here, as the hunters are those crazy people who won't listen to anyone. During the discussion, Gyeongryong suggests that Yongsung take the lead, arguing that his appearance will be more convincing. In Las Vegas, under the control of the Black Cactus clan, our hero encounters Hunter Carlton, who questions his affiliation with the clan. Youngsung informs him that he wants to meet with the clan head in person. However, Carlton points out that even Ikaros representatives can't just make appointments. Carlton becomes more aggressive, demanding that Youngsung introduce himself first. After it is revealed that Youngsung is the one who managed to defeat Maximilian at UHC, Carlton and his companions switch to a friendly demeanor, admiring Youngsung and his accomplishments and calling him handsome. Choi Youngsung clarifies if the head of the Black Cactus clan is in the building. They reply in the affirmative, adding that the head is often disturbed by various scum. The interlocutor then offers to escort Youngsung inside. Choi Youngsung meets with the head of the Black Cactus clan, Roxanne, a level 288 hunter. Roxanne wonders why the Ikaros representative is here and asks to get straight to the point. Youngsung informs him that the clan will lose to the monsters and offers his help. Roxanne is outraged by Youngsung's statement, demanding clarification and showing off her firepower, which scares the people around her. The young man explains that a dungeon of rank A or higher is about to explode in the vicinity of the clan. If the cleanup is not completed in time, hordes of monsters will come out, which will be a disaster for mankind. He, on the other hand, had learned about the new dungeon thanks to Dragon Industries' technology, and therefore requests permission to observe the situation outside in order to react in time in case of danger, emphasizing that a single mistake could lead to loss of life. Roxanne notes that Youngsung has spent 30 years in the abyss and belongs to the first-generation hunters who have always been considered heroes for their loyalty to protecting the interests of the people. She then asks if Youngsung really only intends to observe the dungeon and only plans to intervene if they fail. In the end, she agrees to trust him but warns him that she will not forgive him for lying and is ready to punish him even in hell. On the streets of Las Vegas, Youngsung discusses with Carlton the possible involvement of the clan head in the dungeon cleanup. Carlton confirms that if the dungeon and its boss are A-ranked, The clan head will definitely intervene. When asked about her abilities, Kelton replies that Sister Roxanne is certainly the best. However, immediately afterward, Kelton asks Young Sung to pretend he didn't hear anything. He fears that their parentage will become known, which could land him in big trouble. Later, the action shifts to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. There, a group of hunters are discussing the dungeon. They note that Young Sung of the Icaros clan was right, and it is now important to determine the rank of the dungeon. The name of the dungeon appears on the portal, the Hollow of Endless Predators. However, when trying to enter, the hunters encounter an unexpected restriction. Only one person is allowed to enter the dungeon. The hunters are shocked, realizing the complexity of the situation. Amid an emergency evacuation order and a call to close all establishments within a 10-kilometer radius, crowds discuss what is happening. Despite Young Sung's warning of possible danger, they are dismissive of his words, believing that everything is under control. Meanwhile, on the streets, many people continue to film what is happening on their phones, ignoring the seriousness of the situation. Kitten of Lava and Magma irritably advises dumping these assholes. Young-sun decisively struck the wall, leaving deep marks on it from his claws, causing some of the gawkers to finally rush away. Roxanne, clearly annoyed, demanded that the crowd disperse immediately, signaling that her patience was wearing thin. She warned sternly that disobedience would be punished immediately. It seems that the people had gotten too used to the dungeons during this time. Roxanne urgently gives instructions to her assistant. She demands to launch a drone to check the monsters and activate the thermal imaging system. Poisonous red predators have been spotted and are beginning to surface through the portals. The magical artifacts of intelligence have detected 5 red poison raptors that are already on the surface and pose a serious danger. However, locating the boss wasn't easy, so the team focused on finding him. With the help of scouting devices and magic, they managed to pick up some traces of the boss activity. However, the advancement was blocked by a barrier created by the monster itself. When one of her subordinates asked a question about how to proceed with the men, Roxanne, keeping a cold calm, stated that those who had not had time to evacuate were already doomed. Monitoring the situation, Roxanne deployed the remaining fighters to organize defenses and stand ready to face the monsters. Enemies fell from the darkness. Among them was a high-class monster, Biogosaurus. Using magic artifacts and spells, the hunters fought as hard as they could, repelling the enemy's attacks. However, Roxanne noticed 4 more monsters approaching from different directions. At that time, the leader activated the magic power enhancement with the Enos spell. Her magical energy increased significantly, which allowed her to use a powerful skill, Flaming Ifrit Whip. With rage and fierce determination, she struck, unleashing lashes of fire upon her opponents, seeking to deal with the threat as quickly as possible. The situation was becoming increasingly tense. The leader of the group, Roxanne, decides to retreat immediately. However, it is reported that they could not find the hunter from Icaros. At this time, one of the monsters released a fiery breath, forcing the fighters to act immediately. Young-sung appears and, showing incredible agility, deflects a powerful punch. Those who watched the fight could not hide their admiration, commenting on the impressive skills and skill level of their savior. People in danger sincerely thank their savior for his bravery and protection. Young-sung was the one who inspired everyone with his courage, earning their deep appreciation. However, the hunter replies with a cold expression that he wasn't fighting for them at all. His words make it clear that those who ignored the evacuation were not his priorities. However, Roxanne sternly reminds him that his words and actions could have serious consequences, and Icaros is unlikely to forgive such behavior. However, she reflects on his remarkable abilities and concludes that such a hunter might be worth tolerating despite his deviations from the rules. Leidersha thanked Jensen for his assistance and expressed her willingness to formally recognize his contributions. Nevertheless, the young man puts off acknowledging it until later, reminding him that there are still many monsters ahead that need to be destroyed. Roxanne ponders his reckless bravery with bewilderment, wondering how the Icaros clan even found such an unusual and daring hunter. Jensen, having scanned the area, warns the mages of a monster lodged at the crossroads. When faced with a monster, the hunters launch an attack, but their spells only hold it back without doing much damage. Meanwhile, one of the hunters notices something strange. The monster behaves as if it is under someone else's control. Our hero deduces that the controlling monster is nearby, and soon finds the supposed caster, a monster with a rod, standing on a hillock and surrounded by a magical barrier. Wasting no time, Jensen attacks the enemy, intent on destroying the source of the problem and stopping the threat. Roxanne joins the battle, bolstering the attack with her powerful spells. Together, they defeat the lizard mage, destroy his artifact, the Forest of Corrosion, and completely clear the area of the magical barrier. Reporters instantly surrounded the hunter, asking questions and making assumptions. One of them noted that thanks to Choi Young-sun's actions, no civilians were killed despite the powerful explosion. Others confirmed that it was an Asian hunter with a sword who saved their lives, calling him a true hero. There was an air of respect and gratitude around him, emphasizing his crucial role in closing the dungeon. Jensen angrily rejected any attempt to honor him, saying that what he hated most was being made a hero. Reporters, on the other hand, pondered in amazement. Was it possible for a hunter to hate fame? Jensen understood that he should never become the embodiment of virtue for people, because any mistake would inevitably cause criticism. One of the hunters exclaimed that he wanted to be like Yoon-sun, but was immediately rebuked by Roxanne, who reminded him that everything that happened was only possible because he was Choi Yoon-sun. Its very existence is unique, as martial artists are extremely rare in these times. After some brief thought, Roxanne concluded that making contact with the Ikaros clan seemed like a reasonable move, and a friendship with the hunter Choi En-seong would be considered a natural fit. The scandalous news that a hunter had punched a journalist quickly spread online, sparking heated discussion. Users were divided in their opinions. Some found the incident funny, while others doubted the adequacy of the hunter. Old man Huang, seeing the comments on this story, just couldn't contain his laughter. Among the news, it was mentioned that the Cactus clan had expressed their gratitude for the successful raid, distributing the rewards fairly. Jensen seemed to pay no mind to the reward he received, remaining completely indifferent to discussing the Cactus clan's generosity. This behavior caused obvious bewilderment to Mr. Huang. How can one react so calmly to a sum that reaches $1 trillion, especially given its scale and significance? The opponent tried to rebuke Jensen by pointing out that he was too easy on the finances. In his view, managing resources requires care, because every penny counts. However, Jensen calmly replied that unlike his interlocutor, he did not run the company and had no need to worry about such things. In response, his opponent remarked with a chuckle that Jensen's actions were already similar to running a corporation. Jensen, leaving the discussion of the well-deserved award aside, turned the conversation to the question of his rank promotion. The opponent pointed out that after B rank, grading becomes more difficult as it all comes down to dungeon sweeping. The young man, realizing that he wouldn't get a comprehensive answer, calmly announced his departure, explaining that he needed to train a couple or 3 people in martial arts. Huang, seeing Young-sun off with a glance, suddenly felt a rush of emotion, marveling at what a wonderful man his brother was. Jensen led his group to a training field under the control of the Ikaros clan. The surprised newcomers, not hiding their excitement, asked if they were really allowed to be here. Jensen smiled and assured them that they could make themselves at home here. After expressing their gratitude, the fighters did not hide their excitement, anticipating new opportunities for training. Jensen was introduced to the hunters from Huashen School, led by Iris Lee, who said she was glad to be under his tutelage. Her companions were sure that Iris was the best among them. Looking closer, Jensen suspected a resemblance to Xiaoyun, and he was not mistaken. Smiling modestly, the girl confirmed that she indeed his daughter. Soon Jensen offered Iris a bottle of protein, which embarrassed her slightly. When he realized this, he hastily apologized, adding that he didn't want to embarrass her. Iris assured her that everything was fine and turned the conversation to training, wanting to know where they would start. The young man suggested starting with barbell squats, explaining that it shouldn't be difficult for hunters. The students looked at the equipment with interest, not hiding their surprise. One of them asked about the purpose of the equipment, and it was explained to him that it was intended for training mages and was not related to their classes. Upon receiving the answer, the students looked around at each other, clearly having mixed feelings. However, squatting with a barbell will really help them feel their inner energy and build muscle strength. A notification appeared, indicating the rapid progress of students. Your fast-paced subordinates are getting stronger. The students, exhausted from fatigue after several exercises, struggled to catch their breath, and Jensen announced that the warm-up was over. What? A warm-up? However, our hero tried to calm them down, explaining that the next training session would take place in the mirror world. Jensen believed that martial arts training required utilizing the features of the landscape to bring out the full potential of the fighters. However, the students were caught off guard. Their bodies felt unaccustomedly heavy, and it became increasingly difficult to move. A mannequin with a plain appearance appeared in front of them, causing some to scoff. But in a moment, he was on the attack, knocking down one of the fighters with lightning speed. The astonished students hurriedly rallied together to fight back. Jensen left the students with clear instructions to deal with the dummy and inform him of the victory. he himself left them for a while. The students were confused, and one of them looked at Iris with a confused look and asked what to do. She, still confident, briefly replied that the only way out was to win. The fighters rushed to the attack, shouting threats loudly and lunging at the dummy with full determination to complete the ordeal. In the Icaros clan's restroom, the three hunters were exchanging opinions. One of the hunters praised Jensen for his successful mission in Las Vegas, but added that the man still has a long way to go to reach his level. To this, Elizabeth immediately objected that he was obviously overestimating himself if he thought he could do better. Not wanting to continue the argument, Jensen calmly turned the conversation to something else, offering martial arts training to those present. When one of the hunters cautiously asked if there was a catch or hidden conditions, Jensen dismissed the doubts, assuring them that he wasn't forcing anyone. If they had no desire, he was willing to drop the subject. Elizabeth offered a mutually beneficial exchange. If Jensen would do her training, she would teach him magic. At that moment, approving comments came from the divine patrons. Kitten of Lava and Magma called the idea great, and Virtuous Goddess of Scales urged to try something new. Jensen, hesitating, asked the hunters what magic they thought he would like to learn. The girl confidently assumed it was defense-type magic. After all, he was a fighter, and such magic would better complement his skills. But Jensen calmly clarified that he wanted to study healing magic. The hunters were confused by this answer, and they looked at each other confusedly. Seeing their reactions, Anson wondered if any of them knew how to use this magic, and decided that the best solution would be to turn to the goddess Libra, for she surely has healing magic. The goddess's territory was quiet and peaceful until she rested, lying wearily at her desk. When she heard Jensen's question, the goddess flinched, but her calm demeanor did not betray any displeasure. The young man had no sooner voiced his wish than the goddess bestowed upon him a fifth circle divine healing spell. However, the goddess, continuing to demonstrate her generosity, suddenly reminded him that he was originally supposed to be her avatar, and, in a burst of emotion, offered even more gifts. Confused by her insistence, Jensen reassured the goddess, mentally resolving to approach her with caution from now on. The next day, a new dungeon, the Endless Tower Dungeon, was created in the main hall of the Icaros clan. This caused shock and alarm among the gathered hunters, because this kind of dungeon had already appeared several decades ago. At that time, its difficulty was so high that many hunters were defeated. The initial floors were populated by F-rank monsters, but their strength quickly increased as they ascended through the floors. Eventually, the dungeon reached A rank and became impassable. No hunter was able to complete the sweep, leading to its devastating explosion. According to the rules of the competition, the winner will be the one who reaches the highest point of the dungeon the fastest. Participants began to discuss the strategy of the mop-up, and the idea of splitting into groups was mentioned. However, it soon became clear that group entry was not practiced at the time of the incident, because the complexity of the floors increased with the number of participants. Jensen was impressed by the quality of the dungeon and wondered who its creator was. Despite the warning of increasing difficulty, one of the hunters suggested going as a group, believing that a combined effort would give an advantage in battle. A girl in a school uniform caught Jensen's attention. He wondered if she was a pupil or a student. However, the system reported that the girl was serving a constellation, and her essence could not be fully discerned. His partner Riley remarked that he had glared, and explained that you could tell if she belonged to an Ivy school by her clothes. When Jensen asked what kind of school it was, she explained that Ivy was one of the most prestigious private schools educating the awakened. At that moment, the girl noticed their gaze and looked in their direction in embarrassment, clearly surprised that she had caught their attention. Jensen introduced himself and tried to find out if the girl spoke English. It turned out that she did not, but she wondered how he knew her language. The young man did not go into details, referring to the availability of a suitable skill. The girl said that she knows Russian, but her contract forbids her to use it. She also speaks a little Korean, and smiling, admitted that she is fond of Korean culture, especially K-pop and K-trot. When asked which constellation she serves, the girl apologized, citing a contract that does not allow the disclosure of this information. Jensen offered the girl to join their team, which surprised her. She enthusiastically agreed, noting that she would be happy to fight alongside them. She remarked that her lack of knowledge of Korean might make her uncomfortable, but Jensen reassured her that the translation device would solve any communication problems. Hearing Jensen's call, Odaigon flew out of the fortress. Crovey immediately agreed to go with him, believing that something extraordinary had happened. Before the raid began, Jensen showed the team the basic martial arts books given to him by the training avatar. He invited the participants to choose their favorites, but the unusual titles of the books caused them surprise. He also confirmed that he would teach martial arts for free, but then there were questions about his motives. Here come the monsters. The girl took down the enemies with incredible ease. Jensen had to admit that he had underestimated her abilities, noting how confident and quick she was at the task. After successfully clearing the first floor, the team decided to head to the second floor without delay. Once again, the group faced an unexpected threat: huge Class B wild boars. Jensen and his team were stunned as to what such powerful monsters were doing in a training dungeon. Odaigan immediately used the Great Illusion of Deception spell to destroy the monsters' sanity and weaken them. However, it was important to stay alert, as these boars were not only massive, but also extremely aggressive. Jensen, as always, stood in the first line, preparing to hold back the onslaught of the enemy. Ilea, despite her poor knowledge of Korean, bravely agreed to join forces with her comrades and instantly joined the fight. The situation required everyone's participation. Elizabeth, with her battle sword, applied the beginning sword technique, while Odaigan ended the fight with a magical strike. Hooray! The monsters were defeated thanks to the team's coordinated work. The group decided to continue without delay, heading to the third floor. On the third floor, the team made quick work of the blue ogres, clearing the level without much trouble. After climbing up to the fourth floor, they encountered a more serious opponent, an ice wyvern, a Class A monster. The boys were surprised that such a powerful creature was found at such an early stage. Wasting no time, the group attacked again, but encountered an unexpected difficulty. Their blows did no damage. Odaigan expressed that it was caused by an ancient magic circle, very different from the usual magic of humans. Concentrating, they tried using the king's magic. The team's coordinated actions allowed them to attack the ice wyvern with maximum efficiency. The comrades synchronously entered the battle, trying to land crushing blows. Jensen took advantage of the moment and directed his attack with precision, ending the battle and disarming the monster. Ilea admired Jensen's skill and marveled at his abilities. The companions, watching him, jokingly wondered, "Is he really human?" Determined to succeed, they set out to conquer the fifth floor of the tower. I wonder what monster will appear this time. He didn't have to wait long for a response. Banshee emerged from the gloom, a spirit virtually invulnerable to most attacks. "Banshee, isn't that an A-class monster? That's just crazy." While panic gripped some, Jensen remained calm and determined. He, as always, saw the situation in a different light, commenting with a smile, "What a great workout." Our hero asked Odaigan to use enhancement magic, specifying that the effect must be powerful enough to affect Banshee. Odaigan immediately began to execute, showing readiness and confidence in his actions. Jensen activated sword techniques, including combinations such as Glowing Sword, Illusory Clone, and Spirit Strike. All of these abilities allowed him to land a powerful blow on Banshee, ending the fight. After a brilliant final blow, the dungeon was completely cleared, and the alternate world created for training ended. The fifth floor turned out to be the last floor, which was a bit inconsistent with the name Dungeon of the Endless Tower. However, one of the organizers explained that this dungeon is different from the original version of the tower, as it is quite difficult to reproduce everything exactly as it was in reality. Suddenly, it was announced that the hunters who passed the test should prepare for the next stage, a trip to New York, where an airplane would take them. The thing is that there is a new dungeon, which was previously the responsibility of the clan Erst, but their attempt failed. Now it will be handled by the Icarus team. The location of the dungeon is the east coast of America, Long Beach region. The area was packed with people attracted by the event. The dungeon was originally classified as Level B, but after the failure of the clan, its danger increased. After activating the skill Clairvoyance, Jensen learned that there was a traitor among those present who had made a contract with the demon god Constellation. The constellation kitten of lava and magma asked for extreme caution, reminding them that they would not be able to assist in the dungeon. Although, when a servant enters the dungeon, even the most powerful constellation, such as the demon god Constellation, loses the ability to interfere and can only observe what is happening. Before entering, one of the participants, Elizabeth, suggested that everyone have a beer. Jensen, however, grinned and remarked that he feared losing muscle. After a pause, he admitted he was joking. He just doesn't like alcohol. "If it was a protein shake, I'd consider it," he added with a smile. Ilea was surprised that the team didn't seem intent on discussing a plan of action, and Jensen wondered who among the participants might have contracted with the demon god Constellation. His thoughts turned to Ilea, who seemed suspicious, even though the clan scout had already checked her out. After the winds of chaos separated the participants, Jensen, finding himself alone, tried to realize the situation. He was surrounded by an unfamiliar wooded area that looked like an illusion with dim light. Suddenly his gaze fell on a motionless figure lying on the grass nearby. Jensen approached cautiously and saw a young man in a military uniform, haggard and exhausted. His face was pale and his breathing heavy. Lying on the grass, he raised his head with difficulty and, gathering his strength, asked for water. Jensen handed the water to the young man he found and cautioned him to drink slowly so as not to harm his body in its weakened state. After a few sips, the guy, gripped by surprise and slight panic, expressed bewilderment at the fact that Choi Yoon-song was actually standing in front of him. Our hero remained calm, cutting off unnecessary talk. He asked the young man to tell him what had happened here. The boy, sighing heavily, explained that as soon as their group entered the dungeon, everyone was instantly separated by the chaotic wind. Everyone found themselves alone, and the monsters began to attack, giving no time to search for their allies. He remembered how he tried to fight off the monsters but lost his weapon. During the battle, he was knocked down and fell, seriously injuring his leg. Now all he could do was lie there and wait to see what would happen next. Jensen speculated that the reason for the team's separation was the two-headed chaos hound making teleportation difficult. He carefully watched the lying fellow who, visibly nervous, suddenly declared that he was afraid of being killed for his equipment. This surprised our hero slightly, as his goal now was only to heal his interlocutor's wounds. Jensen decided to use healing magic, warning that he would need silence to concentrate. Using the goddess healing spell, he activated a stream of light that began to repair the damage. The soldier couldn't believe what was happening. How was this possible? The stranger had simply used high-level healing magic on the first person he met. Due to Jensen being a constellation, he was able to connect with a friend formerly known as the Goblin King. Odaigon informed Jensen that he had found other Ikaros hunters, but was hesitant to trust them. So he used magic to discreetly mark their belongings with the symbol. After preparing for the next stage, Jensen instructed his companions to lead everyone to him and try not to quarrel on the way. Meanwhile, Jensen noticed the approaching danger and pointed to the two-headed chaos hound. The soldier, confused and panic-stricken, tried to react, but had no time to defend himself when the monster suddenly attacked him from behind. However, the battle ended quickly, with the stranger eliminating the threat with his heavenly finger ability. After the victory, the stranger explained to the soldier that the most important thing in battle is to accurately calculate the attack, parry, and counterattack. Jensen began to cut up the carcass of the defeated monster. When asked what was going on, he only reminded him of his lost rations and assured him that the monster's meat was edible, as it was free of poison. After that they moved on, and the soldier, anxious to find the hunters, pondered where they might have gone. Finally they met another group, but after hearing the rescue story, some thought it was absurd. How could a hunter from another clan help for nothing? When things got heated, Choi Yoon-song calmly reminded the soldier of the one who saved his life, and urged him to listen to his savior. The young man, confused and distressed, tried to justify himself, claiming that he had acted purely in good faith. A crowd of hunters had gathered in one of the glades. One of them pointed to a mysterious object. It was a massive sandy figure emitting powerful magical energy. The young man noted that he felt strong magic, and then asked if anyone knew what it was. One of the elders replied that it was summoning magic, adding that sand had been falling since they arrived. Presumably the object was related to the boss summoning, which meant a serious threat was about to appear. Jensen believed that somewhere nearby might be the demon god Constellation, and the person who had contracted with it. However, trying to detect them with a magical gaze was useless. The atmosphere of anticipation kept the group wary, but no one took action yet. The demon god Constellation, known as the traitor with the poison dagger, has contracted the ambitious hunter Juris. Although this constellation cannot be called particularly powerful, it is still far superior to ordinary mortals. Juris, deluded, truly believes that his patron is one of the most powerful in the abyss. Determined, he is willing to do anything to earn his approval and strengthen his position, even if it means going to extreme lengths to do so. Chances are, once the grains of sand in that hourglass have finished their journey, the boss will show up. A group of hunters invited Jensen to join them, noting that traveling the dungeon alone would be tantamount to suicide. Our hero, though confident in his abilities, agreed. Meanwhile, the other hunters were trying to conserve their supplies and looked very hungry. Jensen offered to prepare a meal for them, pulling out some unusual ingredients, including turtle eggs, and kindly assuring them that they were not only edible, but quite useful. Using the true fire of samadhi, the young man transformed simple ingredients into a dish that clearly exceeded the expectations of his companions. While Jensen was preparing the food, the hunters wondered, why would a martial artist use such a powerful ability to cook? However, doubts were quickly replaced by delight when one of them tasted the prepared dish. He was amazed. The food literally melted in his mouth, and its effect was unusual. The hunter felt a surge of strength, as if his magical energy had been fully restored. It turned an ordinary meal into something truly incredible. The leader of the Ambitus clan suggested that Jensen join them before his own clan arrived, noting that his current group didn't even have a healer. However, the proposal quickly escalated into a tense conflict between the parties. Things got heated and Jensen had to intervene to calm the hunters before the situation got out of hand. Juris grudgingly noted that the hunters' magical power and stamina had recovered, now making a surprise attack impossible. As soon as the grains of sand in the hourglass ran out, the night of laziness and defeat appeared in the center of the clearing. The air was filled with tension, and the hunters began to prepare for battle with a shout. A giant knight appeared in front of the hunters, shrouded in a glow of magical energy. It soon became clear that it was a constellation servant summoned in a dungeon called the Sanctuary of Laziness and Defeat. The servant of the constellation, towering over the hunters, asked coldly, "Who wants to be the first to pass my test?" Adding ominously, "I'm waiting." The leader of the Schreiber clan, Rain, immediately gave the order to attack. The hunters used the fifth circle magic, Arcane Stone Spear, but to no avail. The knight destroyed the spell in one blow without even moving. "What is this? An S-class monster?" Knight explained that the challenge is designed for one participant at a time. A magical force suddenly chose Rain and carried him into the arena despite his attempts at resistance. Under the pressure of circumstances, Rain failed to handle the task, which led to his failure. The knight unemotionally stated the fact and switched to the next candidate. The knight, looking over the group again and again, questioned the next member of the test. Rain, recovering from his failure, recognized that he had lost all his strength when his opponent's sword touched him. Suddenly, one of the fighters, Choi Young-sun, announced his intention to accept the challenge. The other contestants tried to dissuade him, pointing out the risk of death, but he was determined and confidently headed towards the arena. The Knight of Lenny declares that a fight is about to begin, pulls out his sword, and activates the ability Restriction of Lenny. The hero finds himself bound by magical chains that limit his strength and will. He realizes that these constraints stifle his resolve, just as they do for the other participants in the trial. However, despite the pressure, the hero remembers his goal to become stronger. He overcomes his fear and uses his inner strength to resist the shackles, showing his determination to free himself and continue the fight. The trial ends, and the Knight of Lenny acknowledges that the contestant has passed. He notes that it is incredibly difficult to break free from Lenny's influence, and the trial tests the will and desire to resist this overwhelming feeling. For successfully completing the challenge, the knight promises to allow the participant to meet their master, opening the way to the next stage. The power supporting the Sanctuary of Laziness and Defeat is beginning to fade, and the dungeon should soon disappear. The protagonist senses something amiss and realizes that it was all too easy. Suddenly, he feels a powerful presence and realizes that the ordeal is not yet over. A pack of very dangerous creatures is closing in on the hunters, and Jensen realizes that they will soon reach their position. He realizes that he has a duty to protect everyone around him. Despite fear and doubt, the hero makes the decision to act, reminding himself that avoiding difficulties is not the path to strength. His determination activates his unique skills: subdue the strong, help the weak, and overcome yourself. His body is filled with new power, his aura is strengthened, and the system confirms that protecting the weak increases his existential power. The hero prepares for battle, using the newfound power to protect those around him. The group notices that monsters are approaching from all directions. A pack is spotted to the east, and the heat sensors detect medium-sized creatures to the south. Panic grows, as everyone was sure the dungeon had been cleared. The young man orders everyone to gather in one place to protect the people by concentrating efforts in one point. However, some doubt this plan, believing that it will only attract more monsters. But the guy insists, reminding them that the monsters are moving towards them anyway, and only working together will give them a chance of survival. Jensen decides to divert the attention of all the monsters to himself to give the others a chance to prepare and survive. He begins to act quickly and decisively, rushing straight at the pack of monsters. His attacks become so powerful and swift that the monsters are confused, and he himself moves with incredible speed, rushing past them. The battle amazes those watching what is happening. They see the fire flash across the battlefield, marveling at what is happening, and recognizing that they have never seen such powerful raids before. Choi Young-sun fearlessly continues to fight, throwing himself into the thick of the battle. His speed and strength allow him to deal with several enemies at once, preventing them from approaching his allies. However, there is no end to the number of monsters. Meanwhile, the captain of one of the teams, realizing the seriousness of the situation, starts cursing loudly, reproaching the others for inaction. Under his pressure, the allies finally start to move. They quickly form magic symbols and concentrate their spells in one direction to lend their support to Choi Young-sun. The huge Diakus descends upon Choi Young-sun with tremendous force, but the warrior dodges and instantly counterattacks. Meanwhile, one of the mages notes that such skillful individuals would be a valuable addition to any clan. At one critical moment, Young-sun unsheathes his sword, and with precise, powerful blows, works his way through his enemies, eventually crushing his main opponent. A powerful burst of energy topples the remaining monsters to the ground. After the final clash, the battlefield is littered with enemy bodies. Everything goes quiet. Young-sun stands among the defeated, looking around and breathing heavily, wondering if this is the end. The insidious black-haired adversary ponders the need to kill as many people as possible before the dungeon disappears, or his master will become enraged. This will be possible if we get rid of the main threat, Choi Young-sun. While Young-sun stands pondering the battlefield, his opponent silently sneaks up on him. He is confident that no one will notice his action now, and with a sly smile, he prepares to deliver the fatal blow. However, Young-sun suddenly turns around and intercepts his hand with the dagger. The attacker cries out in horror, and his dagger slides, piercing his own wrist. Through the pain and rage, he retreats, letting out a hoarse cry. Now clutching his dagger, he realizes that he has been exposed. Instead of admitting defeat, the enemy begins to taunt him, claiming that his master is far more powerful and that the real battle is yet to come. His face contorts into a malicious grin, and his tone is imbued with contempt for Young-sun, whom he considers weak and incapable of facing a real threat. Juris, realizing his defeat, starts shouting loudly, accusing Young-sun of attacking him, thus trying to turn the situation in his favor. He claims that he was only defending himself, and that the dagger was targeted because of the counterattack. Young-sun's reaction remains calm, however, and he discreetly refutes the lie, confident that he is right. The other members of the raid, trying to make sense of the situation, decide to check the recordings from the surveillance devices, but the dense trees prevent a detailed analysis. Juris, trying to justify himself, calls out to the members of his clan, reminding them that they belong to the same group. However, the hunters increasingly doubt the truth of his words. Many recall that Juris's behavior has always been distrustful, and his undisguised jealousy of Choi Young-sun's success is now seen as the clear reason for the betrayal and attack. Juris, realizing that his plan is failing, activates his last desperate ability. A flash of energy illuminates the battlefield, and a thick, poisonous fog instantly envelops the space. The hunters begin to gasp and cough, panic spreading among them. Some realize that their fears about the villain were not in vain. One of the hunters clutches his weapon, confidently stating that the rank difference will ensure his victory over Juris. However, Choi Young-sun, worried about the lurking threat, warns that Juris may have contracted with a demonic entity, making him much more dangerous. Juris, upon hearing this, only smirks, showing that the time for doubts has already passed, and using the powerful magic of the fourth circle, releases a spell that incarnates in the form of a poisonous snake. The magic strike easily destroys the hunter's defensive artifact, leaving him unprotected. Influenced by his superior strength, Juris goes on the attack, confident that his enemy will not survive this fight. Young-sun reaches the highest level of mastery by mastering the perfect stance and comprehending the principles of martial arts to a state of absolute perfection. Combining his knowledge and power, he creates the unique smooth sword technique. During the battle, Juris relies on the power granted by the constellation, but his opponent warns of over-reliance on his constellation. At a crucial moment on the brink of death, the magical power of the traitor is activated, saving Juris from imminent death and restoring his body. Realizing the inevitability of defeat, Juris decides to strike one last blow so that he won't escape without a trace. Using the poison cloud of life force transfer technique, he tries to destroy as many hunters as possible, even at the cost of his own life. Odaigon appears at the most tense moment of the battle, declaring his willingness to help and taking the initiative. Upon seeing the deadly poisonous cloud of life force transfer, he immediately casts the detoxification rain spell, which dispels the poison and prevents mass casualties. Juris, weakened and surrounded, realizes his defeat and falls, resigned to the inevitability of the end. The hunters then assess the situation and conclude that the battle is finally over. After the battle, Odaigon complains to his master that the group disobeyed him, pointing out their inappropriate behavior and lack of discipline. In the group, one participant states that a leadership role would suit him as a melee fighter, while the other emphasizes that he trusts no one, which creates a tense situation. Their conversation is interrupted by a notification that the challenge is over. The winners are given a reward for completing the challenge, but not everyone gets it. This time, only Choi Young-shin gets the gift for clearing the dungeon. He chooses the Goddess of Defeat and Laziness award, which grants him the power associated with this constellation. This choice not only opens him up to new abilities, but also to the unique opportunities that come from the patronage of the deity. After the announcement of award, the Goddess of Defeat and Laziness, who had been dormant for a long time, awakens. She declares her intention to train the hero in his duties as a constellation servant, but is confronted with an unexpected statement. He is a constellation himself. This causes her confusion, since only mortals are allowed into the dungeons. Janssen explains that he went to such a daring act solely to deceive the other constellations. The Goddess of Defeat and Laziness is appalled by the hero's act, but despite her condemnation, she recognizes his ambition and charisma, calling him a charming constellation. Janssen, noticing the unusual location, wonders if this is really how constellations choose successors and empower them. The goddess, however, replies that it's different, and begins to tell the story of the place, linking it to her own destiny. She recalls how she once subjugated the most powerful kingdom of the stars, but despite her desire to lose and laziness, she won victories again and again, which only increased her responsibilities. Eventually, tired of the constant triumphs and power, the goddess decided to leave everything behind, sealing herself away for centuries to come. The goddess explains to Yunsen that her successor must awaken and increase his own power, emphasizing that power is at the heart of everything. She points out the fine line between victory and defeat, training and laziness, revealing the philosophy of their interconnectedness. The goddess questions, if someone loses for cheating, is that a victory or a defeat? If you decide to rest to build up your strength, is that laziness or part of the workout? These reflections leave Janssen pondering the complex nature of her power and philosophy. The goddess continues, Yongsheng, being a young constellation, must train according to his characteristics. In time, as he comprehends the true nature of power, his strength will turn into a unique feature that defines him as a constellation. The goddess explains that many constellations spend time increasing their power and engaging in battles, but the true importance lies in awakening their unique characteristic. By realizing this, Janssen comes to a deep appreciation of the nature of the constellations, which allows him to free himself from the constraints of any one feature. Impressed by his epiphany, the goddess recognizes his success and prepares to continue his training to deepen his understanding and develop his potential as a constellation. Janssen asks the goddess if he can seek her advice in the future as her successor. The goddess replies, with a slight sneer, that she hopes he won't abuse this opportunity too often. Janssen promises not to distract her with trifles, after which their conversation takes on a friendly and casual tone. Young Sun is then left alone with his thoughts, remembering that he used to be completely focused only on martial arts. However, he now realizes that the world is much wider. Young Sun tries his hand at cooking, studies magic, and explores new avenues. Janssen arrives at the headquarters of the Corporate Alliance of Lesser Constellations. There, he is informed that communication with him was lost after he entered the dungeon, causing some sort of disturbance. The Goddess of Nightmares ponders our hero's unique situation, noting his contract with the constellation Lenny. She assures him that if the contract is genuine, it can become a powerful source of power, but only if Janssen learns how to use it properly. However, Janssen admits that he doesn't yet understand how to properly apply the power of defeat and laziness. During the discussion, Janssen asks if they have learned anything about the mysterious traitor holding the poison dagger. They explain to him that the traitor is not considered a particularly strong constellation and is rated roughly equal to it, so there is no great cause for concern. However, they add that there are bad rumors about him, as the traitor is known for his cunning tricks and guile. Meanwhile, it becomes clear that the incident with the Madness and Blood Warrior and the dungeon has attracted the attention of other constellations, because of which great caution is now required. After some time, the group arrives at the parking lot next to the famous Hunter George restaurant. Youngson, perplexed as to why they chose to stop here, notes that they could have eaten anywhere else. However, one of the companions explains that while in New York, It is a must-visit restaurant. He adds that Janssen has probably never been here, and reveals that Hunter George is a unique place that serves monster meat dishes, making it one of the few restaurants of its kind in the world. The group walks into the Hunter George restaurant and notices a man at one of the tables loudly voicing his dissatisfaction with the quality of the food. Janssen's companions notice the incident, perplexed as to why he chose to complain here, in such a famous restaurant. At the table, a man unexpectedly thanks Choi Young-sun for his help in the dungeon, alluding to the events that happened there. Janssen modestly replies that it's not worth a thank you, and switches the conversation to food. It turns out that the man asked the restaurant's chefs to reproduce one of the monster meat dishes that Janssen had once prepared. However, despite their best efforts, they were unable to achieve the same result. Soon, George Manuel himself, the owner and chef of the Hunter George restaurant, intervenes in the situation, clearly interested in hearing the truth about who exactly prepared this legendary dish. The skill of preparing monster dishes is an extremely rare talent, and George Manuel, the renowned chef at Hunter George restaurant, specializes exclusively in such dishes. Interested in Choi Young-sun abilities, George asks him to teach him how to cook the very dish Young-sun created in the dungeon. Janssen, somewhat embarrassed by the request, immediately warns that he's not a professional chef and shouldn't expect much. However, George enthusiastically declares that he is not expecting anything, although he is clearly full of expectations. And together they start cooking in the kitchen area of the restaurant. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation, as if a real culinary miracle could happen here. The cooking begins with minotaur meat, the best cut George could find. Young-sun demonstrates a unique technique of softening meat by infusing his internal energy into it, which impresses the chef. Normally, this requires an hour-long mana treatment, but Young-sun manages it much faster thanks to his martial arts skills. Next, he confidently uses his skills, adds seasoning, and sets the heat with magic. George reveals the secret to his cooking is the use of fire, which creates a unique flavor, but Janssen surpasses him by using the true samadhi fire. His dish is admired by both the chef and everyone in attendance, though Young-sun remains humble, claiming there is nothing special about what he does. The story then shifts to Old Man Huang's luxurious headquarters. Sharing the details of his recent adventure, Young-sun mentions the encounter with a servant of the demon god Constellation. Despite his fearsome reputation, the opponent was less formidable than expected, Janssen noted with a slight irony. After briefly discussing the news, the host suddenly invites another guest to enter. He is Nguyen Bao, the president of the Dragon Artifact Corporation. Janssen is explained what this organization does. He is told about monster cores, which are mana accumulations and are used in the energy business. Dragon Artifact turns out to be one of the leading companies in the field of creating artificial artifacts using technologies based on these cores. The organization is actively developing innovative methods using mind resources, and its influence extends to many areas. Huang proudly clarifies that this company is their main subsidiary, emphasizing the scale of its operations and importance to the world. Young-sun is perplexed as to why he is being introduced to Nguyen Bao. It is explained to him that corporations such as Dragon Artifact often need hunters to test their designs, and it can be beneficial to both sides. The owner of the room adds, with a slight smile, that he hopes they can work together productively, and asks that they do so at least for his sake. As he leaves, he drops a joking but hinted at seriousness about how he will one day make Janssen the president of the company. Janssen, trying to understand his role in working with the corporation, clarifies exactly how he will be able to help improve their artifacts. Guyan tells the story of Ronald Totten, an extraordinary researcher specializing in artifacts that transcend all current technology. However, the corporation has lost contact with him, and now there are suspicions that he may have been involved in the affairs of another organization, the myth artifact production of the reputable Parker Group. Nguyen asks Young-sun to infiltrate the myth and bring Ronald back, to which he confidently declares that the task does not seem difficult and that he is going to act alone. Nguyen is surprised and somewhat worried by this decision, but Janssen stands his ground. Janssen receives notification that he has successfully completed the practice trial and is invited to the next stage. Remembering his students, he decides to take advantage of the situation and guide them through the actual practice. They head to the Myth Research Center to complete a mission to infiltrate and free Ronald Totten. At the gate of the building, Janssen explains the purpose of the training: to sneak in and successfully complete the task. Before the operation begins, Janssen wonders which of the guys is most confident in their speed and stealth. 2 volunteers raise their hands in response. Janssen repeats that he is not forcing anyone to participate. emphasizing that he has no need for loyalty that might threaten their lives. Having received their consent, he chooses two and orders them to follow him. The rest of the students stay behind, watching their actions and discussing how Janssen is going to get through the defenses. While the group is moving, the guards notice suspicious movement. They react, assuming someone is trying to break into the territory. One of them notices the presence of a force associated with the constellation, and in a panic they report that someone has contracted the Master of Perverse Illusions. Upon hearing the name Master of Perverted Illusions, Janssen recalls that it is an evil divine constellation that has taken over Mexico. The goddess of nightmares shares that in order for a constellation to take over a country on Earth, it must be among the 20 strongest. Janssen summons Goddess Lenny to learn more about the Master of Perverted Illusions. The goddess expresses surprise at the frequency of his summons, recalling his promise to summon her only as a last resort. Janssen emphasizes that he uses her help exactly as much as needed. Goddess Lenny shares information about the Master of Perverted Illusions. She calls him willful and infantile, comparing him to a child despite his status in the top 20 strongest constellations. When asked by Janssen about the connections of the Master of Perverted Illusions, the goddess mentions the Master of Slowness and Silence. The reputation of Master of Slowness and Silence is due to his actions during the Great Invasion. Despite not having any overt atrocities behind him, he took over northern China with stunning speed. Goddess Lenny confirms that the Master of Slowness and Silence was once one of the strongest constellations, but suggests focusing on the current threat, the Master of Twisted Illusions. Janssen, returning to his group, uses his perception ability to assess the situation. He notices that there is already a battle going on elsewhere with the guards of the Myth Research Center. Taking advantage of this distraction, the group decides to use the moment to stealthily take Ronald away. Janssen, determined to speed up the infiltration, takes two members of his group in his arms and rushes towards the tower with incredible speed using his abilities. His companions are amazed at such agility and power, considering it a true art. Following the coordinates provided, they discover the location where Ronald is being held. The room is a mess and the scientist himself is held captive, blindfolded, frightened and not realizing who has come to see him. The scientist, upon hearing them, realizes that they are representatives of the dragon artifact and thanks them for saving him, begging them to remove the blindfold. However, Ronald warns that there is a battle going on outside. He emphasizes that those attacking are not of his people and that he himself was forcibly brought here. He suggests that his captors intend to force him to sign a contract with Myth. Janssen agrees to free his friend Ronald in the next room as well. He activates his artifact, shattering the walls and instantly opening a path to the prisoner. In the next room, a man named Kim Chang-soon finds himself tied up and immobilized. Ronald exclaims that those who have come have indeed come to rescue them, urging his friend to hurry. They begin to prepare to flee. However, Janssen, determined to test the captive, instantly targets him with a question about the purpose of his stay, giving him 3 seconds to explain himself. The terrified captive claims that he came here to free Ronald. Young Sun, surprised by such a statement, realizes that the man in front of him is an industrial spy. However, he points out that even the Korean clans don't have such agents, and the man in sight is Korean. However, deciding to postpone the proceedings, the group decides to focus on escaping the building. As they enter the corridor, they notice through the windows the destruction outside. Part of the building has collapsed and a bright flash burns in the sky. One member of the group recognizes this as a sign of the presence of a servant of the Master of Perverse Illusions, warning the others to be extra careful now.